Jeffrey Ritzman.
Hi, Jeremy. How are you?
Good. How are you? We've got a rocking intro now.
Yeah, we do. That's pretty cool, huh?
Very nice. So another week, another Paratopia.
That's right.
I'll drink to that.
Well, you'll drink to anything.
Yeah, I don't drink.
I know.
Not a fan of liquids. So what before we begin, what news do we have? Paratopia Live, we are moving to 10 p.m.
That's right.
On Sundays. And what is our new home, Jeff Ritzman?
Well, you mean as far as the radio show goes. You can do that directly on our site. At the top navigation, you'll see a thing that says Paratopia Live. If you go there, on that page is a player. And around 10 o'clock, if you hit that player, it should be streaming when you enter the page. But if not, just hit the play button. If you want to interact a little more than that, you can go to www.blogtalkradio.com/Paratopia. Or you can click on the banner that's on our homepage, and that'll take you right to that little homepage on Blog Talk Radio. And it's great. I mean, it's got everything that we could possibly ask for, including, I don't know, stability.
That's right. We're not used to that in our lives or in the show.
Right.
So we're moving to Blog Talk. That is 10 p.m. Eastern Time, and we'll have up to 2 hours to play with each week. So we'll take it as it goes, and we can take many callers. So feel free to call in. There's a phone number there. We'd love to hear from you. Sundays, not so much Fridays. Fridays, we just like to hear the sound of our own voices, and sometimes guests.
Right. And I'm actually thinking about doing another show somewhere during the week whenever I've got time. So,
nice.
Just random stuff. And Jeremy, you're welcome to do the same thing as well. So,
why, thank you.
We may do that from time to time, just to throw one out and go on for an hour and take calls and all of that. But the official show is Sunday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time.
So, Jeff, one more thing before we get to our guest tonight. As most of you probably know, some of you may not, Bud Hopkins passed away earlier this week. I've been saying it since then, and I'll say it again. My condolences to his friends and family. And, he lived a good, long, full life, right? And controversy till the end, probably the way he liked it. And he was a huge figure in all of this, no matter what side of the coin you fall down on in terms of how you view his research. There's no denying the power that he had in bringing alien abductions to the mainstream. And I'm tempted to say, in a way that they didn't find laughable, but I think they probably did. Probably wasn't until after he really settled back that sort of the fruits of that presented themselves in terms of the mainstream media sort of taking it a little bit more seriously. I think that's due partly to his efforts. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I've said before, there's, everything that we've presented, in the way of rebuttals to his work or anything like that doesn't, none of that, I didn't find any of that to be particularly personal, but, the one thing I always said was, we'll always have respect for the fact that this was the guy who went out on the limb and said, yes, this happens, and people are being affected by it. And so one cannot ignore and deny that. Did I agree with his work, his findings and all that? No, I don't. But one can't deny the impact that the man had on bringing all this stuff to light, along with people like Strieber and so on. This was a big thing, I'm sure, to go on TV and actually talk about way back when. And so I think, if you're like me and you don't agree with the work, you still can't take away that fact that this is the guy who did that. And so, again, our condolences to his friends and family. And whether you agree or disagree, it's a human being who had a pretty tough fight. And hopefully he's found some peace at this point.
Do we have anything else to add here before we get into our guest, Roejen?
I don't think so. I think that's about wraps it up for the week.
All right. Well, Roejen is a pseudonym. He is one of two hosts with pseudonyms, Lobo is the other, from a podcast called Project Archivist, which you can find at www.projectarchivist.com. They're a fairly new show. They had us on in a two-parter, which was nice. So we've decided to have both of them on in singular episodes.
Both very interesting fellows, too.
Yeah, they're interesting. I mean, they have some paranormal stuff in their lives, and they seem pretty balanced.
Yeah.
So, our kind of guys. So,
shockingly enough.
So what the heck? Right after this, let's get to Roejen.
Here comes the interview.
Hey, Paratopia, Jeremy Vaeni here. Next weekend, which is the first weekend of September, specifically September 3rd, specifically my birthday, yes, is the third annual Exeter UFO Festival, which you can find all about find out all about. Is that a Dr. Seuss book? I don't know. By going to www.exeterufofestival.com, all one word, exeterufofestival.com. Tim Banal of Banal of America is hosting this shindig, and I'll be signing books and whatnot at some point on September 3rd, my birthday. So come on down. It's free. You've got speakers like Stanton Friedman, Rich Dolan, Stanton Friedman, Rich Dolan, Kathleen Martin, Rich Dolan, and Stanton Friedman. I don't know who else. I won't be speaking. However, Friday, the night before, Tim and I will be doing a meet and greet with guests of The Good Parade, which is our pop culture comedy show. So come on Friday, say hello to Tim and I. Saturday, see the speakers. Sunday, make fun of everything you just heard. Sounds good, right? It's free. Why not? Speaking of Tim Banal, you know, he's moved his show Banal of America as well as The Good Parade to... get ready, that's right, www.cyberears.com, because hosting these on his own as he was getting to be too costly in both time and money. So he switched over to cyberears.com, which is where Paratopia is located. He asked me what I thought of Cyber Ears, and I told him the truth. It's fantastic. Talk to Miles, the president. Maybe he'll give you a deal. Mention Jeff and Jer. Mention Paratopia. He loves us. We love him. And sure enough, that is exactly what happened. So, if any of you out there in internet lands would like your own podcast, be it for music or talk, and you want the best deal out there, Cyber Ears is the best home for audio podcasts. They have the best service. They have the best customer support. You are a person, not a number, and they will take care of you. So, if that's your thing, head on over to cyberears.com for the bestest treatment ever. Wow, I just did 2 ads in one. And go buy my book Urgency, which Sean, a reader in the UK, calls the most important book I've read ever. He's from the UK, folks. The UK, the home of a little-known author named William Shakespeare. That's right. So when you think about important books and you go Bible, Hamlet, okay, it's a play, but just go with me. Hamlet, Urgency. What you're doing when you say those 3 things is you're counting backwards. 3, 2, 1. So, yeah, that's right. I'm putting the Bible after Hamlet. I don't know. Well, okay, this is going on too long. Anyway, Urgency, that's my book, and it's the best book ever. So, there you go. Don't read it at your own peril. Paratopia, without further ado, please welcome our very special guest from www.projectarchivist.com. He is one half of the broadcast team there. He is, well, we don't know who he is, but he goes by the name Roejen.
Yes.
Hi, Roejen.
Hello, how are you?
Good, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, you had us on your show, and then you've popped by Paratopia Live, and you and Lobo both have some interesting personal stories, it sounds like, and God's willing, you'll share at least some of yours with us here tonight.
Okay.
But first, you have a show called Project Archivist, and you don't deal specifically with just UFOs or paranormal issues. You're sort of all over the map. So tell us about the show, and tell us why you named it Project Archivist.
We named it Project Archivist. For a while, I was struggling with the name. Well, to be honest with you, I really didn't even want to do a paranormal show in the first place. I wanted to do a show about geeky stuff like comic books and sci-fi television shows and video games and things like that. But synchronicities and things they work the way they do in my life kept pushing me back towards the paranormal stuff. And the paranormal is just something that I do. It's not something that, well, it's changed recently, but for a very long time, I was something I was very, very into, and I never really talked about it with anybody. And then it just kind of came along. I ran into Lobo through various shows and hanging out in chat rooms and stuff like that. And then I talked to him a couple of times on Skype, and it just made sense. It just made sense to go that direction. So we started Project Archivist, and I struggled with the name for a while. And then finally I came across, I was thinking about, well, what are we doing? What are we doing? We're archiving things. We're putting it out there so people can hear about different things. And an archivist is somebody who records things or records history and so forth. And originally I was like, well, I don't know how this is going to work, so we'll just stick with the project thing. And that's how it all came about. We didn't want to cover strictly paranormal, though it's been going that way lately. We wanted to cover all aspects of paranormal, but we also wanted to cover different really cool aspects of fringe science. There's a lot of really neat things about ancient history that really fascinate us. And it was just a way to get all this stuff that we're really into out there. And we listen to a lot of paranormal shows. We listen to you guys. We listen to Mysterious Universe. We listen to Banal. The Paracast, pretty much almost every paranormal show that's out there, we've listened to, and we've blatantly ripped off in some way, shape, or form, which I don't mind saying. Everybody's been strong influences on us, and it's kind of like, well, we were influenced by the Beatles. That's why we sound the way we do. That's the way we look at it, and that's how it all came about. We're going to actually be recording episode 11 tonight. So that's our story. That's our plan, and we're sticking to it.
Well, that's cool. So obviously, when you say that you were both into this, it's not like you're just two guys who have an interest. You are into this by way of experience, right?
I've had a few weird experiences.
Or would you make that connection? Would you say that drew you to this, or
I
do
think
you feel
it
like
is.
it's just happenstance?
I think so. I think, yeah, I would say so. That'd be a good way to put it, I would imagine. Yeah. Yeah, because, like, again, I have this really weird thing with synchronicity in my life. It used to really bum me out when I was younger because it felt like I had, like, a lack of control of my life. Like, you're always told you have free will and stuff like that. And I would be put into, this is kind of one of my, I guess, paranormal related experiences. I always keep running into various situations and circumstances, and it's kind of like you're put at a crossroads where it's like you can do or go the path of where this experience is supposed to take you, or you can turn the corner and walk away from it. And I keep coming to different avenues and things like that. And the more I walk away from them, I will again come to that avenue and again come to that avenue until I make the turn and decide to deal with whatever happens to that. And fortunately, it's never really been real bad. I owned a business for a little while. That was pretty rough. I had a paintball business, which was good for a while, but it ended. And now that I look back on it, I can see the experiences and things that I've learned from that, which have made me better in life. So, I would say it's weird paranormal and things like that have probably brought me into it. I would probably say the same for Lobo too. Okay.
So you have paranormal experiences, and then, I assume you watch shows, you read up on it, and all this sort of stuff. When you were doing that as an outsider, is it different now that you're a podcaster, now that you're sort of meeting these people, or having conversations with people that you once heard on TV or in radio programs or read about?
I had thought that it would be, but it really hasn't. When I was growing up, I was a student of Charles Fort, Hans Holzer, all the old school guys. Even Bud Hopkins, may he rest in peace, of course. Take it easy, Bud. But things like that, I was reading this stuff at a very early age. I was reading all kinds of really obscure old ghost hunting books from people that were written way, 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 way back. And I found those always more interesting because back then, they didn't have like a frame of reference or anything like that. They had spiritualism and things, but they didn't have the same kind of frame of reference that we had now. So I've always found those kind of writings to be much different and more entertaining and more educational for me than the stuff that's going on now. I try to have the attitude of not believing in anything that's going on. I know stuff is happening. I have a belief that things are happening, but I try not to gravitate to any one kind of philosophy or belief because, I mean, well, I can swear on this show, but shit, none of us know what's going on, really. We all have... It's the people that say, I know what's going on. I have a belief. I have an idea. This is what's happening. Those are the people that I tend to want to turn around and walk away from because they're usually trying to sell you something or there's something screwy going on there.
Well, what about in terms of your own experiences? Do you trust the literal aspect of them?
Yes. Well, another thing is, I am also, there's a deep skepticism in me. In the experiences that I've had, I can always rationalize away in many different forms. Like I said on the one show, I had the experience with the large dog creature. I was really young. I don't remember very much of that, but I can rationalize that off too. It could have been a very big dog. I had a possession-like experience that I don't remember, but my mom was a partier and she did a lot of partying. So I could have been a child just reacting to that environment. The house had bad wiring. It's an old house. It could have had bad wiring. It could have just been all these weird synchronicity things. So I don't put a lot. Did something happen? Yeah, something did. Am I going to go on a limb and say this was a werewolf or a demonic kind of possession experience or something like that? I don't know. And it doesn't bother me to say that. So
tell people with flesh out the experience for those who didn't hear us on your show.
Okay. When I was a kid, I don't remember a lot of this. My family has reiterated to me numerous times. Most of the family has passed on now. But a lot of times, when I was growing up, I would hear stories about, we lived on this farmhouse. It was close to a major airport. We had this very large dog creature that was on the farm. We raised chickens and rabbits and all those fun things. And we had this very large dog there. I call it a dog. It was really, really, really big. What I always referred to it as is there used to be this Great Dane called Gibson. It was on Oprah once, and it was a huge, huge Great Dane. It was the world's record largest dog or something to that effect. And this dog was really, really big like that. And I know size reference, and I'll get to the reason why. I know how big it was in a few minutes. But this dog would stalk our property, and it would continually harass us. It was really big. It would stalk the edges of the property, and we would pull into the driveway sometimes at night. It would be in the driveway. It never shied away from us. It never attacked us or did anything physical to us, but it would definitely let you know that it was there, and it would challenge you. It would rear up on its hind legs, and it would actually walk for a little bit. It wouldn't do it for very long, but it would walk for a little bit. I do remember that. It would rip open our chicken coops. It would rip screens in our holes with its and the holes in the screens with its claws. It would just do all kinds of really crazy stuff. There was one night in particular, which I've been reminded of dozens of times. My mom had sent me to bed. She'd had some people over there all partying and drinking beer and stuff, and I went to bed. My mom had to pass my room to go to the bathroom, and she heard me up in bed. So she opened up the door to be like, hey, get your ass in bed. It's bedtime. And she opened up the door, and I was standing in the bed. I had wet the bed, and I was looking out the window of the room. She turned the light on, of course, to say, try to catch me, to yell at me to get in bed. And I was looking out the window, and the dog had its paws up, its front paws up in the window, and it was, growling. And she says it had very red eyes. I don't want to call them glowing eyes, but when the light reflects off of animals' eyes at night, it does tend to have like a color glowing effect like that. So she flipped out and threw the beer bottle at the window and chased it off. Close the window. And this is how I know the size reference, because the windows, it was an old farmhouse the way it was. They were about 6.5, almost 7 feet off of the ground. So for this thing to get up and put its paws in the window and leer at you through the window like that, that's where my frame of reference was that I remember for size. Apparently after that, for a week to 2 weeks period of time, I was acting very strangely. I would do things like poke my fingers with sewing needles and finger paint on the wall with the blood coming out of my fingers. I would write things on the wall like, my mom said I wrote on the wall, your souls are food. just really strange things like that. She said I talked like the kid from The Shining. Well, The Shining wasn't out back then, but when The Shining came out, she was like, that's how you acted. You acted really weird like that. And she used to get really pissed off. And she said she used to like smack me and be like, act normal, act normal. For that period of time, light bulbs would explode in the house. Lights would dim. Just really crazy, bizarre stuff. We also had a cat that it was the most tame house cat you could ever imagine. And for that couple of weeks, it went pretty nuts. For some reason, we had carpet panels that went around the wall underneath the bathroom. And the cat would run up and it would head on top of the carpet panels with its claws. And if I walked out of the bathroom or my mom walked out, it would drop down and just scratch your back up and it would hiss and cry and do whatever. And eventually it all passed. But before it passed, my uncle was outside. He lived with us. He was a biker. He was working on his Harley he had. I remember it was a Joe's Hog. It's weird because I remember strange little details like this. And he had saw the dog out in the woods making its way in to go to the chicken coop and harass the chickens again. At this point, he was tired of all the weirdness and stuff that was going on. So he went and got a .22 and he shot it and he winged it, I guess, in the rear hip. And after that, it took off. We didn't see it again. So again, all of these things could have been a series of coincidences. I don't want to call it a werewolf or a dogman, but I've said it did act very dogman werewolf-ish. But again, you know, these are all things that they very easily all could have been explained away. My mom being a partier, I could have just reacted to her. You know, that's just one of the weird little things.
Well, wait a second. When your uncle shot it, do you remember them telling you if it left a blood trail? Did they follow it?
No, I don't remember that. I don't remember them telling me that at all.
So it left, and then you went back to normal?
Yeah, I pretty much became a normal, stereotypical little runt, you know, little kid.
Do you know if it was gradual or if it was really just like clockwork, boom, boom?
I want to say it was gradual, but honestly, I don't remember. I was probably, I think I was around 5 at the time. I actually lived pretty close to where it happened. I actually live, as fate would have it, years later, I actually live right down the road from where it happened. The house is gone now. It's now at Hertz Rent-A-Car, and the whole area's been built up with industrial warehouse buildings and things like that. But yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember really any of it. I remember the dog being in the window. I remember seeing the dog various times because it did scare the hell out of you. It was a really scary creature. It looked kind of like a German Shepherd in the front, and then the hair gradually got thinner in the back, and it had the rear end of like I don't know, a really short-haired, you know, muscular dog. But it would do really strange things. It would stand up like that and charge at you. If it saw you out in the field, it would stand up on its hind legs and it would rear at you and charge for a little bit and get down. And it would be like, come at me, screw with me. And my mom wouldn't let me out. She wouldn't let me out to play in the fields or whatever. I used to want to go out and run around playing in the fields and the woods and stuff, and she never would let me. And then years later, as time went on with the family and stuff, every once in a while they'd bring it up. Now the weird thing is, it kind of got as I got older. It kind of got treated like a dirty family secret. The more I would try to pull it out of people, they would talk about it a little bit and they would just stop talking about it. And I'd be like, well, tell me more about this. I want to know more about this stuff. And they never wanted to talk about it. I think because it freaked them out really bad. My mom, before she passed away recently, a couple of years ago, I was out to dinner with her once, and that was when I was beginning to think about doing the show. And I said, hey, tell me about when I was a kid when that happened. And she was like, why do you want to know about that? I said, I just want to know. I'm really curious about it. You know, was I actually possessed? What happened? And she said, I don't want to talk about that. That was a long time ago. I really don't want to talk about it. It's not something that's important to me. I don't understand why you want to talk about it. And my uncle, who now lives way up north, he's the same way. I try to talk to him about it, and he just kind of grimaces and laughs. He says, you don't want that thing to get you. And he'll always, he'll talk to me like I'm a little kid and be snarky about it, but he won't tell me anything specifically about it. I'm like, I really want to know. I want to know what this was because I study this stuff now. I'm into it. Nah, they don't want to go there, and that's everybody else in the family. The ones that are still alive that I've talked to about it, I get the same kind of reaction from them. Even when I push, they get really uncomfortable and they don't want to talk about it. And I don't know what it is.
Is there any local lore around the area about this thing?
I've looked. I've gone on Google. I've checked for local newspaper clippings. The best I come up with is we did have a series of big cat sightings in Michigan for a while, which a lot of people are like, there's no big cats in Michigan. That's not for real. And then I guess about 10 years ago, the DNR actually caught film of a big cat. But that's the only thing that I've ever come across that that has been similar to it, and that's been another contention with me, because you would figure if it was like this, it has a range it would roam in. You would figure other people would have seen this, or it would have done stuff to other people. But again, it could have just been some local wild dog running around in the woods. But I've looked and I've tried to find things about things like that, if there's any situations or just weird stuff pertaining to a dog of that stature like that, and there's nothing. And then again, at the time, there wasn't many houses around where that was. There was another one a ways down the road, and there was some woods behind it, and there might have been some farm property out in that way. But again, I'm almost 40 now, so this happened probably when I was around 5 or 6 or something along those lines. So it's hard to say, even if the people that were alive back then probably wouldn't be around now anyways.
Did you ask your family if they've had any other experiences like this, or are they just so unreceptive to talking about it that it's not worth asking?
Some have, but I've got some pretty loopy people in my family. I've got an aunt that she claims to be very sensitive to a lot of things. My grandmother claimed to be very sensitive to a lot of things. I have a Native American great-grandmother that I used to hear stories about, who she had an uncanny knack of knowing things. But I've never that's really about it. But again, it's one of those things where...
What were they sensitive to when you say sensitive to things?
Just things that were going to happen, experiences in the family, ill omens, like when things were going to happen. I've ran into that a few times in my life where I've had experiences very much like that, which is another story I'll go into. I've got experiences, but they're all very strange. They don't fit into a cookie cutter kind of pattern. For example, the dog one I'm talking about right now, it doesn't fit into, quote, a werewolf kind of pattern, but it doesn't fit into a possession kind of pattern. It's a weird overlapping of things. But my grandmother, they would always say things. They would always have impressions when bad things ill omens were going to happen and things along those lines. And I guess that's something that apparently runs in my family. But again, I don't know. It's one of those things where I don't go around poking my family and saying, "Hey, are you psychic? Are you psychic?" Blah blah blah. So
are you psychic?
I don't think so. I've never ran into psychic. I don't really believe in psychic. I do believe that people have very strong intuitive premonition abilities. And I think it's a very common thing. That's why I don't like calling it psychic, but you see it all the time with moms who somehow know that their daughters are screwing around or they're pregnant, or you see it where wives somehow have a feeling that their husbands are cheating, or you see the relationship between husbands and wives. It's not, you can't quite call it psychic, but I'm not sure if I'm making sense with it, but there's an intuitiveness there that can't be explained. And I think a lot of people, for whatever reason, sometimes are tuned into that kind of thing. It's not something that you can rely on. It's not something you can go out and buy a lottery ticket I've never ran into anybody yet where I've been convinced they can talk to spirits or ghosts or anything like that. But I do believe that people do have some form of sixth sense, call it what you will. But it's not something that, it's not something that can be readily graded or scientifically studied. And likewise, because of what it is, being the way that it is, it's like a person, like say somebody like eyesight, some people are colorblind, some people are tone deaf, some people might just not have that sixth sense. But again, that's not something that I really chalk up to being paranormal. I think it's just nature of being human. I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so let's go back then. What was your next sort of event? I mean, I'm assuming that you've got things like synchronicity that follow you around all the time, but then you have these sort of pockmarks of event, the werewolf being one. What would be the next?
There was another event where my mom and her boyfriend, we were heading into Vegas once. This is another story I told on your show. It was a UFO-like encounter, but I never did see a UFO. I didn't see an alien. Nothing was shoved up my butt. Nothing like that happened. We were heading in towards Vegas, and this one I remember much more clearer, I should say, because I was young enough to I was old enough to actually have an impression put into my head about this. And we were heading into Vegas. Off in the distance to the right, I remember it was a very clear night. Out in the desert, you can see stars for miles. And I was a kid, and I was like, oh, stars, this is awesome. And off to the distance, off to the right, there was a slow modulating kind of glow coming over the horizon of this hill. It looked very much the way a transformer does when it explodes off in the distance and you have that bright flash of light. It would slowly grow really bright, dim down, glow really bright, dim down. As we were heading up the road and getting closer and closer towards it, the vehicle stalled out. It was an International Scout. And the vehicle did stall out, and I remember every time that it would pulse, it would start pulsing at a greater rate. And every time it would pulse, the headlights on the vehicle would dim, and the radio would start getting staticky. I was freaking out at the time. I was going nuts, and my mom was like, "Settle down, just calm down." I'm like, "What's going on, Mom? What's going on?" Because I remember that's what I think jars it in my head was the fear of what's going on. And then finally, the vehicle just stopped running. The radio got staticky, and then everything just stopped running. So we got out. He was fiddling under the hood, flashlight. In the distance, the pulsing was still slightly increasing. It was never like boom, 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 but it did have a rhythm to it, and the rhythm was increasing. So I'm out walking around in the desert at night. My mom was freaking out. She's like, "Stay over here by the truck. There's scorpions and crap out there, snakes. I don't want you out there screwing around with that stuff." And I'm like, "Well, what's going on? I want to see, Eventually, after tinkering around with the truck, he did something. In the old vehicles, you could take a screwdriver and you could arc it over. There used to be they don't work the same way they do now, but it used to be a master starting solenoid, and you could arc it over and a spark would happen. We got the car running and going again. But this was only after the pulsing eventually subsided and completely went away, and then we got the vehicle started and we went back on our way again. Again, the way my brain works when I look back, I think that could have been some kind of a transformer arcing or something off in the distance over the crest of the hill that we couldn't see. And I know that when transformers pop and large electrical discharges happen, you have an electromagnetic pulse, which does screw up electronics and things like that. I didn't know that when I was younger, but as I've gotten older, I've tried to figure out what is this? What was this? Could this have been a UFO? Time passed. Eventually, the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out. And the movie poster for that, there is a road going up between two hills, and then behind the two hills, you see like this, light coming from behind both hills. My mom flipped out, and she was like, "That's what it was," And when she saw that movie poster, she was like, "That was what it was." And I remember seeing at the drive-in movie, we went and saw Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And my mom was like, there's a part in the movie where the little boy opens the door and the UFO's outside and the boy gets sucked away or whatever. My mom was like, that would be you. That would have been you at the time. When that was going on in the desert, that would have been you. Your dumbass would have walked out there and gotten taken by aliens. So yeah, that was another one. But again, I can come up with a rational explanation for what that could have been. So, that was another weird one.
Now, when you go down a list like this, right, because I'm just going to keep asking you, okay, what was the next one? What was the next one? At what point do you look back and go, okay, one at a time I can rationally throw these away, but how many weird things have to happen before you can't rationalize an answer?
Well, I did have one particular thing. I've had two quote unquote paranormal-ish experiences that I just chalk up to, okay, that's screwed up. One of them happened to me several years ago. And I go back to the free will kind of thing again. This was an experience that I've never really heard of anybody encountering before. The closest I've come to it was there's a movie, Donnie Darko is what it was. And that's the closest thing. Something that happened in that movie, which I can relate it to closely. I was getting out of my van. We were unloading groceries into the house. And I know it wasn't very long, but it felt like a very long time. And it was a very terrifying kind of experience. I mean, when I explain to people, they're like, well, how is this terrifying? But the experience happened where it felt like it took forever, but for lack of a better word, I would know things almost a split second before they were going to happen. I would be walking and it was like, there's going to be a car coming around that corner. It's going to be blue. A car would come around the corner. It was blue. The door was going to open up. The door opened up. And all of these things were happening. The only way I can explain it is to say it was happening in real time, but I knew I had feelings that this is what's going to happen right before it happens. That doesn't sound like a big deal, but for that particular instance, and this is where it gets weird, it felt like I was realizing all of this is carved in stone. All of this is happening I have no choice. Everything is just happening, and there's nothing that I can do about it to prevent it. And I know that probably sounds weird to you or people listening, but it just felt very much like this is it. Everything is happening. You think you have control of everything that's going on, but you don't have control of what's going on. You are on a path where things are being preset before you. And the only way I could say it, it's really hard to describe because it felt like a sensation where I was ahead of time. And I must have just sat there, been staring off into space. And my daughter was like, "Dad, are you okay?" And I'd look at her, but of course I was looking at her right before she said it because I knew she was going to say it. And she was even flipping out. She's like, "Are you all right?" I must have looked like I was on drugs to her. And then just as quickly as it came, it passed, and that was it. And when it passed, I was sweating. My heart was beating. I just had to sit down. It was very, very strange, very weird feeling. And I hope to God no one ever has to go through it because I've never experienced anything like it before. And I've tried to talk to people and said, "Hey, have you ever had anything like this experience?" It kind of happened before, and I've never met anybody that's ever had that kind of experience. I don't know what brought it on. I don't know what caused it.
I think a lot of people have had the experience of having that moment where they realize or feel that they realize that everything is being manipulated like some sort of puppet master outside of you. Well, I guess that's a good way to put it, but it didn't even entirely feel like that. It just felt like this is it. You're on this ride, and you're on the ride till the ride ends. Enjoy the ride. So that was with that feeling. I think when most people, I had that, when I had the UFO sighting in the 8th grade, where it was that, and coupled with the synchronicity of my uncle having seen a UFO and my grandparents not being surprised and all this, and that sort of took me out of myself and into, oh my God, it was all of this orchestrated, and then this feeling of being, I was just talking to Dan Mitchell about this, being initiated, he talks about an initiation, and I've sort of written about that, this feeling of being initiated into something. I don't know that that's specifically what you're talking about, but I think that they all sort of go together. I think they're there's some kind of an experience that kicks you into that motion. There's something happens to everybody.
Yeah,
but it's hard. I think it's hard not to then think you're special, right? Because this is what we hear out of New Age all the time. So
that annoys the hell out of me.
Yeah, how did that not happen for you?
Yeah,
how do you not feel special?
I don't know. I just don't. I don't think I am. I think. Maybe I got lucky and I got to glimpse a brief window of something, but I didn't get any enlightenment out of it. I didn't get any kind of message. Nothing was downloaded into my brain. Nothing like that happened. It was just a very brief feeling of you think that you're in control, but you're not. But it's the hardest part I've had about rationalizing all that was it goes counter to the synchronicity things that I've had in my life that I explained earlier. Well, I come to these crossroads and I keep, for whatever reason, I'll be like, no, I don't want to deal with that, but it keeps coming back and it keeps coming back. But it kind of goes counter to that because it's like, if I'm on this path and I have no choice of what I'm going to do, everything is predetermined and set before me, then it goes counter to, then the fact that I decided to make the left turn instead of the right turn was already there. And then why does it keep coming back? And I know that sounds kind of weird and hard to explain. That's where I have a hard time rationalizing with, I come back to, what the hell was that? Why was that the way it was? Maybe it was just something weird. As far as not feeling special, I don't know. I don't have any wisdom to offer anybody. I don't have anything to tell anybody I've never received any kind of message saying that I am special.
So when you say that you feel as though, okay, now you're on this ride, so get ready to enjoy the ride. What's the ride? What's different about your life than it was prior to that moment?
That's just it. Nothing. Nothing now. I still struggle with it. It doesn't really bother me all that much, but in the back of my head, it's like, okay, do we truly have free will, or is this path that we're set on the path that we have to go, and do we have really control over, or I don't know. I'm not really sure. I don't know. But I don't ponder it very much because when it comes right down to it, I don't understand it. I don't think I'm going to understand it, and I've got better shit to worry about. I've got other things to deal with.
So okay, what is there another pockmark experience?
I had an experience where I think my grandparents were screwing with me from the other side of the grave. I think they were having a good time at my expense. I've also caught some EVPs and stuff. But again, you got to understand, I have no problem with the concept that ghosts and spirits and things like that exist. It's just as common. Yeah, it's raining out. Yeah, of course it's raining out. It rains. There's ghosts. Well, of course there's ghosts. And I think it's if you believe in any kind of spirituality or spirit or something greater than what you are, then the concept of taking that next step and saying, there's possibly ghosts. There could be ghosts, even in a religious aspect where you have a soul and you go on to heaven or hell or something. Well, that implies that you have a soul. So the idea of ghosts being out there, it's just, for me, it's a common sense thing. It's like, yeah, there's ghosts, whatever.
Well, then let me ask you this, because it doesn't sound, and I do want to hear the grandparent story, but it doesn't sound like there's an evolution of things going on here, right?
I don't think so. I think it's just a very strange set of odd circumstances that I've managed to find
that's
myself
just your
in.
life. That it's just like
yeah, and I think that's
just
probably
like,
why
they're just ghosts. Yeah, there's just weird shit in my life.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think that's what keeps me grounded and keeps me from going into this whole I'm special kind of weirdness, because it's like, yeah, this is my life, but if you'll excuse me, I need to go to work now. That I think that's what it comes down to. Because even though I've had these experiences, again, I haven't got anything out of them. I haven't won the lottery. I'm not a prophet. I'm just trying to get my kids off to school in the morning, and it would be neat if I did get something cool out of it or something extra, or, but then again, maybe it's better that I didn't, because then I would become part of that crowd.
Do you think that's it, that it's sort of, whatever this is giving you as much as you're willing to take, and that if you were to really examine this stuff, and maybe doing it through your podcast will actually trigger more or something,
I don't know if I want more. I don't know. It's like when you guys were on my show, I used to do ghost hunting and stuff, but I don't do that anymore because I don't want to bring that stuff home with me. And yes, I believe in ghosts and things like that, but I also believe that there are other things out there that would like you to think that they're a ghost. And I don't want that stuff to come home with me. I don't want my wife and my kids and things like that to be affected. I don't want that stuff to come back. I don't want it to be here. I would just assume, walk away from it and say, all right, well, I've got as much as I'm going to get, I'm fine with that. And because I don't want to, I don't know, it comes down to the fear of the unknown. I don't know what's out there. I don't entirely want to know what's out there, unless it's going to be something cool and friendly and stuff. But I don't think we can call those shots. I don't think I have the ability to say, yes, I want to go out and discover ghosts and things like that, but I don't want any of the bad stuff to come home with me. That's not how life works, and I don't think that's how this stuff works. And I don't want
your grandparents. You think that was definitely your grandparents?
Yeah, I think it was my grandparents. It's a long story short. I'll make it as quick as possible. When I was a kid, my grandparents were babysitting me. They took me out. My grandfather was buying a new car, and he took me out in the car. With them, I was in the back seat, and we went out for this ride, a test drive, and they had this vinyl pleather, on both sides of the door. And I don't know why, but I was a little kid. I went back and forth in the back seat, and while they were driving, I chewed holes in this stuff all along the back seats along the insides of the car in the back. And my grandparents were pissed, and my grandfather bought the car. And for years and years growing up, I kept hearing about this story about how I went around the inside of this car and chewed up the interior of the car. So they bought the car, because I did that. So time passes. My grandparents have been gone for a while now. I have my children. We're out shopping one day. We come home, and one of my daughters had done the exact same thing that I had done in the back seat, going back and forth and chewing holes in the back of the car. My wife got pissed, but it was just one of those situations where I just knew that it was my grandparents were sitting there laughing at me, screwing with me, or it was one of them, my grandfather or something. I just had a very strong impression because I was laughing, but at the same time I was crying, and I couldn't really, my wife was like, "What's the matter with you?" And I just, again, my wife comes from a very Pentecostal religious background, and I have very conservative in-laws, and I just couldn't explain it to her. I'm like, this is just something you can't understand. And I'm like, don't be mad at her. And she's like, she chewed a hole in the back seat of the car, and boy, she chewed holes around. I'm like, just let it go. And I just remember going, man, you guys are assholes, But this is one of those things where I just really felt like they were there, and I really felt like I was, they were having a laugh at my expense from wherever the great beyond is, or whatever it was. It was just, one of those kinds of things.
And when you met Lobo, whose real name is Lobo, is that correct?
No, again, well, I'll tell you why.
I just like kidding you about that. I'm sorry.
Well, I'll let everybody know why we go by pseudonyms, and you guys understand. There's a lot of really weird people out there in paranormal podcast world.
No.
And if you use your real names, and if somebody disagrees with what we're saying or something happens, I don't want to worry about some guy knocking on my front door you're being controlled by HARP. I need to put a bullet through your brain, or somebody going on my real name Facebook and causing problems for my wife and my kids or people that are on Facebook and things like that. I have fans that know what our real name is, but it's kind of like what he says in the Batman movie, where it's like a person can be screwed with and corrupted, or things like that can happen. Whereas if you create a persona, if I ever get tired of this world of podcasting and the paranormal, or someone just really gets on my case and starts harassing me, I can just end it and shut it down and cut that persona off and walk away and not really be screwed with very much. Whereas I know you guys have gone through your share of being messed with and things like that. Whereas I have a little bit of a safety net, and I don't have to worry about bringing as much as that home with me. It's not because I'm trying to be, I've got this cool spooky name and stuff. It's more of, I want to have a degree of my personal life. I try to keep a lot of this stuff out of my personal life, and I try to live a fairly normal life.
Right.
And I just don't want to be harassed on the internet or anything like that.
Well, that makes perfect sense, and I wish you would talk some of that sense into me long ago.
Well, I learned from you guys and other people. You guys have been you were really, that's another thing with me and Lobo. You guys were a big influence on us. I don't necessarily agree with everything that you guys say, but the cool thing is you can say something and go, I don't agree with that, but I can say, hey, Jeremy, check out this cool Star Wars video I found. And it's cool. It's not a big deal. But you guys, we would listen to your shows and stuff, and it would be like, you know what? These guys, this show had a problem doing this with this people, or these people had a paid service and they walked out of it and their world fell apart. And we were able to look at the way people did interviews, the kind of guests they had, and we were able to say, you know what, let's not do what they did there, and let's do what they did over here. And one of the things we learned is don't use your real name.
Yeah.
Well,
so you meet Lobo, and do you know that he also has weird paranormal experiences?
Yeah, Lobo's a lot more open about. He doesn't care as much as I do, and Lobo's kind of a funny bag of tricks. I know he hasn't talked about everything that's happened to him. Actually, it's kind of funny. The only people we've ever opened up to are you guys. For whatever reason, somehow or another, you guys managed to pluck this stuff out of us. Like on our show, we were going to do this dream episode, which hopefully we'll talk about tonight. But I didn't want to do it because I didn't want the show to be about me and Lobo. Unless we're interviewing somebody and what we're saying can enhance what we're talking about with the person that we're interviewing. I generally don't like to talk about my paranormal experiences because they're not normal paranormal experiences, A. And B, unless I'm talking to somebody who's in the paranormal field, I'm a little scared that people are going to be weirded out by what I have to say, or they're going to have the attitude of, oh, you're one of those guys that's saying stuff to be special or to be weird, which is exactly what I don't want to be. I don't want to be looked at as, I don't want to be the special person. So it's gotten more and more, I've come out of my paranormal closet, if you will, with more and more people that I know. So it hasn't been as bad. But Lobo definitely has a lot of experiences, and he's a lot more open to talk about them. It's just a matter of finding out what he has to say and what he wants to talk about in relation to what's going on.
Well, do you find it surprising that you befriended and started a show with another guy with paranormal experiences, or do you find that you often meet people, just happen to meet people like that?
I meet people like that all the time. And that's another weird thing that I've finally gotten used to. For a while, it used to really bum me out or weird me out in different ways. It's like Jeff said on our show, where you kind of become this paranormal go-to guy. Like at work, I was on a trip once and we had other people there, and I came out and I said, yeah, I do this show. And we started talking about stuff. And at first people go, oh, ghosts, blah, 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 UFOs. And they kind of laugh. And always these people eventually come up and they pull you off the side and they say, hey, can I talk to you about something without you laughing at me? And I'll go, yeah, sure. And I find that everybody has a story, or most people have a story. And most people that have these stories don't want to be laughed at. They want to be able to confide in somebody, or a lot of people, I should say. They'll be like, hey, I want to tell you about something just so you don't think I'm weird. Now, all right, tell me your story. Let me hear what you got to say. And a lot of people will be like, so what do you think? And I'll say, well, from my experiences and from things that I've read, it could be this, it could be that. I've worked with a lot of local ghost hunting groups, and I have a lot of friends of people that are beginning to know that. So I've had a lot even of close personal friends contact me and say, hey, dude, I think my house is haunted. Well, why? And then we go through the step process that people go through to determine if their house is haunted. And eventually, if we'll decide, okay, you do have something going on in your house, and what it comes down to is, well, your house is haunted. Is it hurting you? Well, no. Is it doing anything bad to you? No. All right, well, don't worry about it. It's one of those things. Just, people are like, how can you be like that? I'm like, well, what are you going to do? You want to get an exorcist in the house or something? It's not bothering you right now. Just consider it a live-in roommate that's not going to drink your beer.
I'm wondering, with people who have haunted houses, does that paranormal phenomenon react the same way that Jeff and I talk about? It's just sort of the overarching structure of it, where if you pay more attention to the haunting and whatever you give to it, positive or negative energy, fear or love, whatever, is that what you get back? Do you get back a scary episode? Do you get back a more intense
It depends
haunting?
what it is. This is where it comes into the fact that I think I believe in ghosts, but I also believe in everything. I'm also somewhat of a nuts and bolts UFO guy. I believe in. I don't think everything, just because you think you have a ghost in your house, it might not be a ghost. There are lots of other things that we don't understand, and some of the stuff we think we understand that's out there that could be along with the lines of what you're talking about. It might not necessarily be the exact same thing that you're talking about, but it could behave that way. It could be the more you give, okay, well, you're paying attention to me, I need something off of you to be able to exist. Maybe it looks at it like food or something. Again, I don't know, but it could react that way. It could be like, okay, well, the more you pay attention to it, the more it's going to affect you. Right now, I have a friend whose mom is going through some really weird stuff at her house. It doesn't happen all the time. And I've known these people for a really, really long time. I used to date her daughter, so I've known her most of my life. And just within the last couple of years, she started having these really strange haunting experiences, but they don't sync together the way a normal haunting experience does. She said she's seen an old man in her house. She said she's heard voices of little children. Just all these really unrelated experiences where it's like, okay, you're seeing an old man in the house. If it's the idea is if it's a ghost, that you're going to continue to see an old man or have an experience around that old man. She's having bizarre, different kinds of experiences where I don't think it's a ghost, because she's been living in this house for 30 plus years, and all of a sudden this just starts happening to her. So I was like, well, did you buy any new antiques? Have you had any new construction? Have you brought anything new into the home? Are you under any kind of stress right now? Have you been drinking? Not that I think you're hallucinating, but drinking it could lower your spiritual inhibitions, allowing something to attack you. Not that I think you're drunk and you're seeing stuff. And she's like, no, nothing like that's happened. And her ex-husband passed away. I'm like, well, I know your ex-husband. I don't think this is something he would do, and you're not seeing your ex-husband. And then she's had phone calls where she'll be over someone's house and she'll get a phone call from her house where nobody's there, and she'll hear growling on the phone. And then they'll call the phone company and say, can you check this? And no, we don't know what to tell you. So I think that particular person is experiencing something that's not necessarily a ghost. And, I've told her, I'm like, don't react to it. Just let it go. Maybe it's some kind of adolescent, immature kind of spirit of some kind that's just trying to get a rise out of you. And the more you pay attention to it, the more it's going to give you some kind of an experience to rattle your nerves. But I've also talked to people where they've had the ghost of an old lady in their house, and they would smell cigarette smoke, and they would hear walking on the steps. But they would have these consistent kinds of relatable experiences all tied to that kind of person. And that would be all they would have, and that would be the extent of it.
So, Ro, I have to ask this.
Yeah.
I can totally respect the idea that you don't want to use your real name. I understand that to a very large degree, because in many ways I wish that I didn't feel it was necessary to have to use my real name, but I do feel that. But in the sense of you not kind of following up, I'm listening to kind of the odd events of your life here. And the thing that strikes me when I hear all this is that Jeremy called it pockmarks. I kind of look at it and I go, it's knocking. And I think for the most part, you probably haven't followed up on these events like in a hardcore way. Could you possibly see this as kind of knocking, like something is trying to get your attention and over and over and over, and you're simply not answering the door?
I get that way in regards to the things with synchronicity that happen to me. I've come to a point now where I no longer, I used to fight it a lot as I was growing up, because again, I didn't understand what it was. Is this God? Is this, what is this? Now that I'm older, it's sort of, I guess I could just say I look at it as God trying to affect my life in some way, shape, or form, which is weird because I'm not really a Christian oriented person. But it's just, now I just say, okay, well, fine, I'll do this then. like in regards to me doing my podcast, a whole series of events with regards to me getting the recording programs and stuff that I use, the equipment that I actually needed, just happening to find Lobo the way that I did. The servers and everything getting the way set up it was all literally, it just kept getting thrown at me. And I'm like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And then something else would happen. And then something else would happen. And then finally I just said, all right, fine, I'll do it. I'm here, and I don't mind doing it. I love doing it. I have a blast doing it.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, me and like everybody that listens to our show, me and Lobo are a couple of clowns. We take this stuff real seriously, but not so serious that we can't laugh at it and have a good time with it, because too many people get bogged down with this. As far as me not going in hardcore and investigating it, I don't really know if I want to right now. I mean, if it's waited for me this long, it can wait a little longer. If it's going to keep knocking, again, it's going to happen on my terms. Unless I start having creepy visitations with people at night, which hasn't happened yet, it's going to be happy with what it gets. I mean, I'm doing a show about this kind of stuff. So, it's one of those things where this is my life. I'm going to do what I want with it. I've got this fake little pseudonym that I use, and, I'll do what I need to do, but nothing bad has happened with it though. I had a situation where me and my mom, we had a falling out. We didn't talk for 10 years. And through a very bizarre set of circumstances, 1 in a million kind of thing, we were put back into contact with one another. And we were in contact for a while, and then she passed away. But the way that it all went down, because I'm able to now recognize the way that these synchronicities in my life work, I realized when my mom passed away, I didn't regret not talking to her for 10 years. And I realized we were supposed to run into each other, and we were supposed to be able to do that so we could make our amends and, settle our differences with one another before she moved on. Right. And, it didn't, when my mom actually passed away, of course it bugged me because my mom died, but it wasn't like, oh God, I wish I'd have had the time to get this worked out or get that worked out. It was one of those things where I was like, I didn't understand what was going on at the time. Why does my mom keep coming back in my life in this weird way? I didn't want to talk to this person. Once it was all done and over with, my mom passed away. I said, oh, okay, now it all makes sense. I understand why those things happened the way that they did. And, it was almost as soon as I realized that my mom was dying, it made perfect sense to me. And I'm like, no, this is the way this is supposed to be. This is how this is supposed to happen. So I've never had anything bad happen to it. Even when things bad, it seems like they're shitty at the time. When it's all done over with, I can look back and say, okay, that was the reason for this, or that was the reason for that.
Right.
And, again, I mean, it sounds kind of new age goddish or something along those lines, but I just accept it. I just say, all right, this is what it is. And,
Well, do you think that, that doing the show, I mean, this is the interesting part to me, is that you've had passing interest, I think it's safe to say, in all of these subjects across the board.
Yeah.
And now you're in this situation. Now you're doing a show.
Yeah.
Find that odd at all?
No, it's just, I think this is the way it's supposed to go. I don't know how long I'm going to do the show. I know we've had, at least I've been told that I don't know anything about, I really don't know what I'm doing. I'm kind of just, that's one of the reasons why we when people listen to our show, we sound so much like so many of the other paranormal shows out there, because that's my frame of reference. That's, this is where I go, that person did that right, that person did that right, I'm going to imitate that. And I don't know how long we're going to do the show. We're going to keep doing the show as long as the way to keep doing the show presents itself.
If something happened that was serious, would you walk?
What do you mean? Like,
if you had a really serious experience that was absolutely undeniable and in your face, would you walk?
No. That's actually, that's something about all this that really fascinates. I think this is why I'm into all of this stuff. I think in some weird way or another that's beyond our realm of understanding, I think it's all somehow intertwined in some weird way, shape, or form, which I don't know. I don't know where it's going to lead. I don't even know if it's going to lead me anywhere. I personally don't think it's going to lead me anywhere. But I'm having a fun ride doing it. There are a cruddy part, like having a podcast. You guys have a podcast. For you, it's a little bit different. You guys more or less just do your show with minimal editing, and you still got to put it up on there. You got to mix it and all that. For me, I've got to record the segments that we record. Unless we're doing an interview, I got to go out and find music for the show. I got to edit it. I pretty much do it all on my own. Lobo can't do a whole lot because he's on the other side. And that's the cruddy part about doing the show. When I'm recording the show and me and Lobo are looking for stuff and we're laughing and having a good time, and I know the fans are laughing and having a good time, that really makes it all worthwhile for me. And I've had a lot of people that, even your fans, you guys have got really cool fans. I've met a lot of really cool people through you guys, just through interacting with your show. I can't say that enough. Paratopia fans are really cool people.
They're amazing people. Yes,
they're
absolutely.
Really cool, really smart people, and I'm really glad to have them along. And it's like I said before, you guys have a much different show than we do, so I'm amazed that they are actually hanging around. But thank God,
Yeah.
But if something were to go back, because I might be drifting, but to go back, if something really crazy were to happen, I wouldn't walk. If anything, I would probably. I've thought about this a lot. I've said if I had a paranormal UFO experience, I wouldn't tell anybody about it, because I think everybody's experience, that whatever happens to them, is in some way or another meant for them. It's whether it's UFO, ghost, or the other, as you like to term it, if it's something outside of the realm of ghost or whatever, it's your experience. And when other people come along and try to interpret it or try to push it into a certain direction, I don't know if that's a good thing. I don't know, because only you know what happened to you. It's like being in a bad relationship or going through a divorce. You know what that divorce was like, and for someone else to come along and try to tell you differently, it's not how it is. Yeah. So I don't know if I were to have a UFO serious experience like that, I don't know if I would even tell anybody, because I don't want people saying, well, it was this or it was that or it was this. Well, I don't know what it is, but it's mine, and I'm going to hold it, and I'm going to see where it takes me. As long as I'm not getting ripped apart or having things inserted in me or strange.
Well, I mean, ultimately, like when you talk about your experiences, I guess at some point you're going to run into somebody that you have to defend that story to or from.
Yeah. I'll cross
and that's never really that pleasant, unless they're like extraordinarily polite about it, which there are a lot of people who will approach that way. But by and large, I mean, you're going to be defending yourself against people who say you're completely full of shit or whatever.
And that's fine, because at that point, you're not going to convince that person otherwise. Which again, this leads me back to earlier. I think there's people out there that just can't have an experience of some kind. They're so grounded in the now and in the here that they're completely tuned out to everything. Because I know people that are like that. That all of this UFO stuff is rubbish. All of this ghost stuff is absolutely rubbish. And they're like, "Oh, I want to have an experience. I've tried, but I can't." It's like, well, I don't think you can, and I don't think you're ever going to be able to. So. When I tell people, when they come up to me, they're like, I want to get into this stuff. I wanted to get into ghost hunting. I wanted to get into UFOs. I say, don't. Walk away. It's all garbage. None of it's real. It's all crap. Don't get involved with it. Right. Because one of two things can happen. You can become one of those people where it's like, this stuff is garbage and it's not real. And then you're shutting yourself off to what could be a really cool thing in life. Or you could run the potential of having stuff like that happen. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the things that I find really fascinating about the realm of the paranormal is it's the paradigm shifts. It's when people that are dead stout, this stuff isn't real, and then something happens to them. And it's like, okay, well, what is that like? What is it, the fact that now your whole world has to change, and you can't grasp onto that? I guess maybe it's a sadist in me or something like that. I don't know, or whatever you want to call it. I want to look at people and like, okay, well, you don't believe in this. This is something you can't believe in, yet it's happening to you, and you're still trying to say it didn't happen. You're still trying to rationalize that it didn't happen. That's what fascinates me. It's like, how can you say that? You had this experience. You know that it happened. It happened to you. You don't know what happened, but you know something happened to you, and you're still trying to say it didn't happen. Right. And for whatever reason, that's the stuff that I really gravitate towards, and that's the stuff that I'm really, really curious about. I know that there's, in my mind, I believe that there's something or maybe multiple things or lots of things that are out there, and I'm cool with that because I'm not equipped to handle it. But again, I still have to pay my house payment and all that junk. So in the end, it doesn't really matter to me. But I look at the people where things have happened and it's like, no, this didn't happen to me. This couldn't have happened to me. This didn't happen. This didn't happen. And it's like, yeah, it did. And it did. You're right. Something did, but it didn't happen. That's the stuff that makes me tick. That's where I want to say, really, what's going on in your head? I don't know.
Do you think that, I think it's safe to say, and I certainly don't mean this in any derogatory way, but I think you grew up in a fairly anti-structural household. And do you think that these days that a potential for the reason, when I heard your story on your show, I said, well, this is textbook to what people like George Hansen have talked about, living this very anti-structured life and having very, very strange things manifest for you across the board. But when you get older and you mature from that and you move on, at some point, do you think that possibly the reason that you don't engage us more is that you recognize or you connect the weird things to a very anti-structured life, and you like, this is like the second time that you said during the interview that you got your house payment to pay, and you've got your kids to deal with, and you've got this and that and the other. Like, it seems like you really thirst for the routine life, which I don't blame you. I do too. Well, but do you think that's maybe that's where you connect it? Like in your head, do you connect the paranormal or digging around in it to something that speaks of an anti-structural life?
I think it's possible, but I've also met people that have had very structured lives that have still had strange things happen to them. Mm-hmm. And in the back of my head, I'm wondering where, again, I relate to where you guys have come from, and I hear your voices in my head going, is this something else that's trying to draw these people into this? Is this something that's trying to get attention and these people don't want it? So yeah, I look for anti-structure when I hear people's stories, and usually I've got a pretty good BS detector, and usually within pretty quick time, fair amount of time, you can just tell when someone's jerking your chain, and at that point, I'll let them finish up their story or do whatever, and then I'll just move on or whatever to the next one. But I like structure. It could have been a result of the way I've lived, the life that I've lived and things like that. So. It's very possible. I go back to the house to pay, bills to pay, and house payment and stuff all the time because ultimately, my bank isn't going to care. Hey, I've had a ghost experience. But well, that's nice. Where's the house
exactly
payment?
Right.
Where's the car payment? Right. No one's going to. The bank doesn't care about that stuff. I still have to get up in the morning, and I still have to go to work, and I still have to be a parent for my kids, and a good husband and all that. Because in the end, this stuff happens to you. In the end, you still have to get your act together, and you still have to be that kind of person. Unless I'm going to be one of those guys that goes out and does a circuit and tries to sell a book and changes my story every couple of years.
Right, exactly. So, well, I mean, that's ultimately that is the way it's got to go. And this is what I get asked the question more these days than I used to. But back, 10 or 12 years ago, this same question popped up again and again. Knowing what you know and seeing what you've seen, how do you continue to live a normal life?
You have to.
And I said, well, that's exactly it. I said, because what other choice is there? I mean,
what else are you going to do?
Well, and the other option here is that, I thought at one point a lot like you did. I used to think, when somebody asked me about paranormal stuff, I've always wanted to do this. And I would just say, run. When you have those thoughts, just run because partially because of some of the reasons that you talk about, but partially because of the after effects of what something like that can cause.
Well, and it also comes down to how you can deal with it. People are really insistent about getting into it. Like ghost hunting, it's like our show is kind of known. We've become known as anti-ghost hunter, which we're not. I'm not at all anti-ghost hunter. We're an anti-reality television show, and it's just because there's a lot of stuff out there that people see this and they want to latch onto that. And right. I tell people, you want to get into ghost hunting? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, why do you want to get into it? Well, I want to go out and experience ghosts. Well, why? Are you looking to prove that this stuff is real, or are you looking to try to prove something to yourself? Because if you're going out there to try to prove to the world that ghosts are real and UFOs are real and this stuff is happening, you're not going to get anywhere, because every ghost show goes out there and gets, they get EVPs and they get evidence and this and that. Even you guys, the Devil's Advocate show, you guys got me listening to their show. Those guys are scientists and they get scientific backed evidence, and it doesn't make any difference.
Right.
So if you're going to go out there, I tell people, if you're doing this to go out there and try to prove that the ghosts and stuff are real, you're not going to get anywhere, and you're wasting your time, and you're going to fall out of it really fast. If you're going out there for some kind of spiritual growth and you're looking in something in yourself just to answer some of your own questions, you might not get those answers, but you're not going to walk away from it the same way you would as if you're trying to go out there for the wrong reasons. And, then it comes down to what are the right reasons and what are the wrong reasons. That's debatable too.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's in a way is pretty sound advice. And the other half of me, though, later on said something to the effect of, well, you can get into it, but just be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you're looking into. And I still believe that. And for all the reasons that you mentioned as well.
Yeah.
But the other part of me says, everyone, that kind of approaches you as an interested party. Like, I'm really interested in what you have to say about this, and then you tell them something, and then they immediately, you can tell they're engaged in it. They want to know more, or they want to experience something on their own. And the problem with that, more times than not, is, are they going to be too jumpy about it, or are they not going to jump enough? And the question is their paradigm going to be, that's what I tell people more than anything is, be prepared to not see the world quite the same way as you did, if indeed you experience something extraordinary.
Maybe that's why it doesn't mess with me that bad, because I'm acceptant to the fact that I really don't try to have a paradigm ultimately. As long as it isn't affecting me and my family at home, I'm cool with pretty much anything. So maybe that's why it doesn't affect me, because it's not going to get anywhere. The only thing that really did was that one time where I had that brief out of time experience where it was like, whoa, what is this? Because that wasn't, I can accept little green men, okay? Because again, there's little green men up in the sky. I still got to go to work tomorrow. I can accept ghosts for the very same reasons. The whole weird time thing, it was like, this is very bizarre because I'm tripping and I'm not on drugs.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the only one thing. And fortunately, that hasn't happened again. And, if it happens again, I think it'll be like the kind of dream experiences where I've had, where I go back to that, where I'll just be like, okay, I'll just deal with this as it happens, kind of thing. So, would you be fearful if you saw a UFO or what you would deem to be only something that would represent the other? If you could indeed tell the difference. It would depend on what the experience was. I probably would have, I wouldn't call it fear, but I would have a healthy amount of respect for what was going on at the time. Right. Because then instantly what would go in my mind, I know how it would react. I would go, there's a UFO. Okay, well, if there's a UFO in front of me, then that means that UFOs are probably real. If UFOs are probably real, that means that the chance of me getting abduction is good. If I get abducted, the weird things that happen to people when they're abducted is probably good. So at that point, I would be like, this is something I don't think I want to engage any further than what I'm seeing right now. If I did see a UFO, it flew over, shot some laser beams around and took off, I'd be like, okay, that was a UFO. What was it? I don't know. I saw something up in the sky. It shot some lights. It did some weird stuff and it took off. I didn't physically go up and touch it. So it could be something screwing with me, trying to tell me that I did see a UFO, or it could have actually have been a UFO. Either way, I go back to I have to get up and go to work tomorrow.
Yeah, it does. It all comes back down to that again. That's the thing. I mean,
so unless I was abducted,
yeah, I can imagine. I mean, is it safe to say that in the grand scheme of things, in the way of, I'd say, like, just take the past 5 years, in the grand scheme of things, is it safe to say you haven't been involved publicly, nor, even as an aside, involved too deeply in the field, quote unquote, the field? Like, is this something that you've kept your finger on for a while and really haven't interacted with? Is this your first interaction into the field, quote unquote, of all this paranormal stuff?
This is as far as I'm comfortably wanting to get into the field. I'm not an investigator. I have done ghost hunts. I have had things happen to me at ghost hunts. But again, I just don't think they're that special, because the idea of this happened. Well, yeah, there's probably a ghost here. That's why, hand me my pop, Right. But I don't want to, I'm not really interested in going to UFO conferences, because I've been to them and I've seen the people walk around in the Klingon costumes, and I've seen the people that are trying to talk to me about my space brothers. I've been to the ghost hunting shows, and I've been to this stuff, and it's like, it's like you guys said, it's kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, and and another thing is, I'm not learning anything by going to any of this stuff. It's the same stuff rehashed over and over again in different ways. And it just doesn't, it's like, well, all right, I've heard that. Like, that's one of the things, like with Project Archivist, we try to do when we do interviews. We really try to, I don't want to interview everybody. I try to be really picky and choosy about when we do interviews. And even when we do talk to people that have been interviewed before, we do everything we can to try to get different information out of that person, or to try to, I guess, for lack of a better word, I'll say, attack them from a different angle. When we had Linda Godfrey on, we let her talk about werewolves and introduce herself, because when you get people on the show, you guys knows how it is. They have a cookie cutter interview thing that they're used. They go into interview mode and they start giving you typical answers that they've given on every other show. And we tell people up front, if you're coming on our show, that's great. We would love to talk to you. We want to talk to you about this, this, and this. Or we say, we've heard you on other shows and you've gone to talk about this and you've been cut off. You can talk about that here. We want to hear that. When Linda was on the show, we wanted to make it a point to talk about Native Americans and there is things with werewolves and dogmen and things like that. And she was like, oh yeah, no problem. Great. You know, and she really opened up to it because no one had ever asked her stuff like that before. Like, I think everybody has different stories. They want to tell them the same stuff over and over again. And when we interview people, we want to make it a point that when people listen to our show, they're going to walk away with something different or something they might have not have heard before, or maybe get something from a fresh perspective or from a different angle. That was why we wanted you guys on the show, because you're not the typical stereotypical UFO guest. You guys have different views on what's happening and what you think things are. And regardless if I agree with them or not, they're not that far-fetched of ideas compared to anything else that's out there. And you guys have got good, intelligent stuff to say. And you're in the same boat as we are. You want people to learn. You want people to try to come out of it with something different and something new. Which I've seen a lot with the direction your guys' show is taking lately with the interviews and stuff you guys are doing. You're kind of like us. You're asking different questions and you're trying to go into different directions. So that's again why, we've become such big fanboys,
Well, thanks for all that. I mean, let me ask you, when it comes to the field, and that's such a loosely defined thing, especially in this. What is your take, being someone who is not ingrained in it as deeply as a lot of people are?
Batshit crazy.
What is your take? Well, yeah. I mean, no. What is
my
your
take on the whole?
Like,
well,
no, not on the whole. I mean, on the notion of that there is a gross amount of venom and infighting and all of that. I mean, do you look at that and go, that is not something I even want to get involved in? Or do you look at that and go, that's just kind of the way it goes in human interaction about a topic that really has no structure?
I see it as both.
Yeah.
The simple answer is I see it as both. For one thing, there is no quote field. You have UFO people, you have Bigfoot people, you have ghost people, and very rarely do the two ever do they all intertwine, which I don't like. I can't understand how none of this is anything that we understand. And I've seen a lot of cases where things overlap. You guys have talked about before. People have had UFO experiences that overlap into poltergeist experiences. Or you've heard of people talk Bigfoot sightings that coincide with UFO sightings. And when those situations happen, that's the stuff where it's like, no, we can't talk about that. We can't talk about that. Well, why not? And when I look at the field as a whole, to encapsulate it all as, quote, the field, I think it's really sad that you have a lot of people out there that they just can't get along, because there's a lot of people saying a lot of good things, and a lot of people are working in the same direction for a lot of stuff. And for whatever reason, they can't get along. My spaceship theory is different than your spaceship theory. My theory that UFOs are all demonic creatures, or ghosts are all demonic creatures trying to do this to you or that to you. And, to go back to the Rodney King analogy, can't we all just get along, Like you guys, again, I don't always agree with what you say, but I'm not going to discount you for it, because you're not negative, hurtful people. I've heard you guys go on some rants and stuff like that, but I think that's been a reaction to stuff that's happened to you guys. And, everybody goes off and gets a little pissed every once in a while. That's understandable. Sure. But the same token, you guys have good chunks of knowledge, and some of the stuff you say, I go, yeah, that's I can vibe with that. And what I don't vibe with, I don't lose any sleep over. It's not a big deal, because you guys, I can say, they're looking for answers. They're exploring different things. They're looking for the same answers as we are. But when I look at the ufology field is really screwed up. It's actually, I kind of laugh at it. It's actually kind of comical to look at, because when you look at the people and the things that they're fighting over and stuff like that, it's like, really? Are you for real? It's really?
Yeah.
It's like, and that's one of the reasons, like me and Lobo, we laugh and we poke fun at the paranormal world so much, because there's so much of that out there. And it's like, man, you people really need to fucking mellow out.
Well, yeah. I mean, that was kind of like the thing when Jeremy and I started the show. It was this used to be fun. Like back in the day, this used to be fun before it got a little too crazy and a little too aggravated.
I don't want to get that far into it. I don't want it not to be fun. I'm having a lot of fun doing it. And if it wants to push me further, then it's going to have to push me further on my terms. And if it doesn't like it, too bad. That's just. It's just the way it's going to have to be. And we're having a lot of fun with it, and I don't ever not want to have fun with it. But I still want to learn, and I still want to teach people. And I want people to listen to the show and laugh and have a good time and hopefully walk away learning something.
So you're only engaging this as far as the show. That's really
as far as I want to gauge it. Like, I've gone out on ghost hunting. There's a lot of Michigan ghost hunting groups. A lot of them are pissed at us because we won't have ghost hunting groups on the show. I've got one exception. We've got a gentleman coming up pretty soon that's from Dublin, Ireland, and he's part of a ghost hunting team. And the only reason I'm having him on the show is because I'm curious how ghost hunting is different overseas and how the paranormal is viewed overseas different than it is in America. And they've got more of a heritage and a history over there of weird strangeness, and it's ingrained in them. They see things differently. They're not afraid of dealing with things like fae or fairy spirits. It's totally different for them. And the only reason we have that person coming on the show is because, again, we want to relate to people. It's not all what you see on television. It's, yes, Ghost Hunters International did a show, but still they Americanized it. And I want to talk to somebody that's really ingrained in it over there, and I want to get their take on it. I want to get, because I did a pre-interview with the guy, and I asked him some questions about UFOs, and he goes, "No, we only do ghosts." And I said, "Well, I'm not trying to, we weren't taping it. I was just doing a feel him out interview." I said, "Well, what about," I brought up the ghost UFO, poltergeist connection. What do you think about that? And he kind of hesitated for a second. And he said, "Well," he goes, "I have seen lights in the skies, and I have seen lights in the woods, and I have seen things like that." He goes, "I don't know what they are, and I don't quite want to put my finger on what they are." And what it was is because I was kind of pushing him out of his boundaries a little bit, and it was a little uncomfortable for him. And I let it go. I didn't push it any further than that. But, I'm not going to lie. I enjoyed doing that because I liked pushing him into a different perspective that he wasn't quite ready to put some thought into. And I let it go. Yeah. But we've got ghost hunting groups around here. "Oh, I want to be on your show. I want to be on their show." And it's like, why? What are you going to tell me? That you've went into a haunted house? You got some EVPs? It's like the one lady you had on your show a little while ago. She was great. And I was listening to the episode. I'm like, yes, you're right. Yes, I agree with that. I agree with it. Yes, yes, yes. Because she's right. Why go back to the house? It's haunted. What are you going to do?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's why I don't want to get ghost hunting people on.
Yeah. Some people bottom out with it. I don't disagree with you at all. We've talked about before that if all of the paranormal groups or interests, I should say, could get together and kind of exchange data, then that would be great. And I think that you'd find all these correlations. They're certainly there. It's obvious to everyone that they're there. The problem is that you've got this whole, this structure that maybe even some UFO people are not keen on the ghost scene and therefore just shy away from it as a whole. And that's problematic in and of itself.
Yeah.
But so many of them being connected, throughout everything. But when you're talking about guests and you're talking about the people that you've met and the people that you've talked to, and I'm not just talking about for your show, but I'm talking about the long haul of you looking into this and talking and meeting different people out in public.
Yeah.
Is there any one person that you can put your finger on that you could say, this guy I spoke to or I interviewed, and it did totally set my ear? Like, I know I've got, like, Jacques Vallée is the guy to me, and George Hansen is the guy to me that, like, set me on my ear and made me look at this in a completely different way.
I don't think I do. I don't think I do. Because again, it's so many different people. It's so many, like, I read when I was a kid, I was young, reading Charles Fort books, like, Lowe and all of his stuff. And then I read a whole bunch of books. I would be the guy that would go into the library, the big libraries or the old bookstores, and I would be the guy that would look for really, really obscure old ghost hunting books, that I would go back and find in old issues of the Fortean Times and stuff. I guess in that regard, I was a really weird kid because I was, I used to love, when I was like 8 years old, I used to love watching In Search Of, Leonard Nimoy. Right. That was the bomb. I couldn't get enough of that show.
Right.
It probably didn't help that my aunt was like, what, I'm psychic and you might be, too, egging me on in those regards, but who knows? So, but I learned, I think I learned at a very young age as I grew up. I learned from reading people like Valet and John Keel. Keel was another person that I would read a lot. Right. And, you know, I never ever told anybody about this stuff. My mom knew I was reading this stuff, but, you know, I never told anybody else that I was reading this stuff. So I think I learned from good people. Yeah. And then as time went on, again, listening to your guys' show, you have definitely affected the way that I think of things, you know, the affected the way to where what I got of all of you guys, and even before that with the old books is don't grab on to any one thing. Don't be afraid to question things. Don't be afraid to, like you said, don't be afraid to call something fake. You know, don't be afraid to question what's going on. And of any of the field, that's the one thing that I've got out of it, to where I can look at all the stuff that's going on, and then when I look at these people that are the Space Brothers are coming, or the Disclosure, we call them Disclosure zombies. You know, when you look at the Disclosure zombies, and it's like, God, man, what, wow, you know, it's just like, yeah. That's crazy. You know, you people are fascinating. You know, what are you smoking? I want to try that. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I think you guys are making a difference. I think I don't think there's a lot. You know, when you look at the UFO conventions and things like that, I don't think there's a whole lot of us out there as much as the other people. But I think there's people out there that you guys have affected, that your show and shows much like yours have taught. You know, question things. It's okay to question things, and it's okay to have a different opinion. But don't be the guy that's out there trying to lead the way, or say I have the answers and you have to follow me, or you know, something like that. And and it's good and healthy to have people out there that are, you know, that, like me, I don't have any problem looking into UFOs, ghosts. Me and Lobo were talking today. I'm not real up on the Bigfoot thing. Lobo is, so I've kind of passed that on to Lobo, and he set up some interviews for stuff like that. And I said, all right, you run those. I'll sit in the background. But Lobo approaches things from a very strange scientific perspective. So I said, all right, you know, you want to run with it? If we can get something out of this, and we can teach people something, and we can apply the way we do things to that topic, I'm fine. Let's go for it. And I've let him have the reins to take up that aspect of the show. Because if it were up to me, I wouldn't cover stuff like that. But again, it's part of our field. It's part of what we study, and it probably deserves some looking into.
Right.
So, you know.
Well, Jeremy had told me before the show even started that I'm supposed to ask you about your dream thing.
Oh, the dream thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you guys were talking on your Paratopia live show, which I think you guys forgot a little bit too much about. I'm glad you're getting it worked out. Last week's show was funny, even though it fell apart. Yes. I go back again. You guys have got great fans, because even though your show is falling apart on the air and you're doing the best you can to hold it together, everybody in the chat room was laughing it up, having a good time, and everybody was like, "Hey, we're here, we're rolling with this."
That's good. You know, let me tell you why I got so bent. You know why I got so bent? I rushed home for my wife's birthday party for that.
Yeah.
Not good, dude.
I could just hear you guys on the air trying to hold it together, and it was funny. But you know what? That show, you guys do a really good show, and you give your paid subscribers a really good show, and that's kind of like the icing on the cake. That's kind of like a bonus that you're giving people. So my attitude is, hey, you know what? It's not affecting the stuff that you guys are talking about. It's just kind of a bonus thing. And if it screws up or it whacks out or whatever, who cares? You know,
that's absolutely the right way to think about it.
You know, yeah, and I mean, I wasn't like, oh, Paratopia sucks, I'm done with you guys, your live show is a piece of crap, and blah blah blah. I was like, you know what? This is funny, because you guys are really laid back, and you laugh and you have a good time on that show when you interact with the fans, and I get it, and it's cool. But again, you didn't promise that to people that are premium members. That was
right.
So you know what? We're just going to do this and have fun with it. And if anybody gets pissed off about it, well, they can screw off. Because
and technical glitches, by the way, are like nobody's fault. It's just these things just happen. It's just
exactly.
You know, but
you guys had talked on the show about the whole dream thing, and me and Lobo were in the chat, and me and Lobo had talked about doing last October. I took the kids out trick-or-treating, and I was starving. So pretty much all I did was all night was just eat candy out of the bag. So I got home, and I was like, you know, Beavis. I'm like, I'm going, you know, I'm just digging out on candy. Then I crashed and I went to bed. That night I had really, really crazy dreams, and I woke up the next day and I wrote them down. Because I had read somewhere at some point that if you don't write your dreams down as soon as you wake up, you naturally just forget them. Your body's not programmed to remember them. So I wrote them all down. And actually, Jeremy, I sent you a video of that little Chinese girl singing that Pon Pon song, and all the colors and stuff were in it. The dreams that I had were very vivid, very bright, very colorful, very strange dreams. And it got me along the lines of thinking, I'm like, okay, well, I've read about trying to be in control of your dreams and things like that. And then I very much delved into this realm of dream control, but I took it from an aspect of the things that you eat and the foods that you eat affect the way you dream. and then, which of course led me into all the lucid dreaming stuff. So I began to experiment with eating different kinds of food before I went to bed, about an hour before I went to bed. Cheese is some wicked stuff. If you really want to have some really altered, strange DMT acid trip kind of dreams, different cheeses really whack your perception and stuff out. And then the movie Inception came out, the movie Inception got a lot of stuff right and it got some stuff really wrong. But I'm veering. But anyhow, I started getting really into eating different kinds of food, and I started reading up on the internet. And for about, I'd say 2 months, I was getting really, really heavily into trying to influence my dreams and see, not so much be in control of them. I've never been able to control my dreams, but it was really fun to like have to like experiment with this altered, weird kind of reality for a little while. I eventually quit doing it mainly because my wife said, "You need to knock this stuff off," because I would just do really weird stuff at night. I would have like I had sleep paralysis. I would have sleep paralysis many times. The old Hag syndrome where you wake up and you can't move. I've had that probably 6 times. I would have exploding head syndrome, which actually it happens to quite a lot of people. They just don't realize it. I had exploding head syndrome happen many, many times. The first couple of times that stuff happens to you, it's really freaky if you don't know what's going on. After a while, it just became really annoying because it'd be like, the first time you wake up, you're like, oh my God, what's going on? And then because of shows like yours and the paranormal and stuff, I would be like, okay, I'm having sleep paralysis. So this weird shadow thing at the end of my bed really isn't there. Just, okay, it's fading away. Oh, I can feel my fingers. I'm Jesus, will this hurry up and end, you know?
Right.
After I just like, Jesus Christ, I'm having sleep paralysis again. Oh, fuck. All right, I'll just sit here and let it happen. Exploding head syndrome, same way. You know, you're laying there and then all of a sudden I would hear something sound like a gunshot or somebody calling my name. I'd wake up, what? Christ. And I'd try to fall back to sleep. So that was one of the downsides of experimenting with this stuff. The other stuff is my wife would just get really pissed off because I would be running in my sleep. I would have a dream where she's falling off of a cliff of some kind or falling in the water, and I would just reach out and grab her in the middle of the night very violently, which for me was bad. But imagine being asleep and all of a sudden somebody just reaches out and grabs you out of a dead sleep. Right. So she kind of got pissed off after a while, and I would have other dreams where I would be laughing my ass off in my sleep, and my wife would be like, "I can deal with the snoring, you know, I can deal with you talking in your sleep once in a while, but you cracking up in hysterics while you're asleep is just too weird for me, you know." So eventually she's like, "I don't know what you're doing, I don't know what's going on or what you're screwing around with, but you need to stop because I'm getting tired of dealing with it."
There's a fungi out there that if you eat and go to sleep, you'll have really wild dreams, but it's illegal.
Yeah. There's all kinds of stuff out there.
Well, you bring up probably the last question I got for you, which is, one of the big things in all of this is the spouse. I mean, you pay your taxes, you pay your mortgage,
yep,
and you got a wife. Yep. And so I ask this of a lot of people, and it's interesting some of the responses you get. How does your wife feel about this stuff and your interest in it, or your ineffectual your engagement of it in the show?
You know, I knew you were going to ask that question. She doesn't know a lot about it. She kind of thinks a lot of it's hokey, and she knows I'm into it. She doesn't know the extent of it. She's never listened to my show. She's heard me talk to a few people off the air and stuff like that, but she doesn't know the extent of how far I'm into it. She doesn't know the experiences that I've had. And I really don't want to let her know. I don't know how she would react to it. I don't know if she would look at me like, "Oh, you're just, you're full of shit." I don't, and I would rather her not know about it than have the wrong response. I guess I'm more comfortable, I guess for lack of a better term, I guess I'm comfortable lying to her. I've never told her about the dog experience. Plus with her coming from a very religious Pentecostal background, if I say, "Listen, I think I saw something that was either a demonic or a werewolf. I might have been possessed at some time or another, and some really crazy weird stuff went down, and this whole synchronicity thing and how sometimes I kind of real intuitive and I pick up on," like, she knows about the whole me being, I hate saying psychic because I really don't believe in psychics, but I've had a lot of intuitive stuff where I have a feeling things are going to happen, and it really bugs the hell out of her. It bugs me sometimes too, but it really freaks her out. So things will happen.
Has she given you any indication of her? Like, has she ever said to you, "I had this weird thing," or anything like that from her past?
No, but she does have the intuitive thing going on as well. And we just make the joke. I'm like, yeah, I'm rubbing off on you. But that's where, again, I don't think it's a psychic thing. I think it's just her being a human, and we're married and we're close to one another. You know, I think it's sometimes just her picking up on me, because there's a lot of times where this is another thing. It's really annoying. I'll just be thinking about something in my head as I'm doing the dishes or whatever. You know, you'll have a conversation with yourself in your head. Everybody does it. And you know, she'll be like, what'd you say? What are you doing? And I'll be, nothing. I didn't say anything. And she'll go, yeah, I heard you. And on the back of my head, I'll be going, Jesus Christ, because she picks up on stuff. You know, she doesn't exactly know what she's picking up on. I don't know what she's picking up on. But me and her do that all the time. It's just one of those things where I go, yeah, I'm rubbing off on you, you know. But she doesn't see it as, she looks at it as like, yeah, my husband's kind of weird. And that's as far as it really gets taken with us. But I shield her from it. I don't really want her to know, because I don't know how she's going to react. My kids are more aware of what I do than my wife is. My daughter, like on my shelves in my office right now, my walls are lined with all kinds of paranormal books. I've got Keel here. I can see all the Charles Fort books. You know, I've got the Men Who Stare at Goats. I've got all kinds of stuff here. And I've told my kids, anytime you want to go read that stuff, you go right ahead. And she's smart. You know, she watches the ghost hunting shows, and she picks up on it. She knows what's BS and she knows what's not. Like there's one show, I can't remember if it's Paranormal State or what it was, but she goes, well, I'll say Paranormal State. I don't know if that's what it was, but she'll be like, oh yeah, Paranormal State, the Jersey Shore of the paranormal community.
Yeah.
You know, and she's 16 years old, so she knows what's up. You know, she doesn't. She knows as much as I let her know as much as her age and her, you know, what she understands, because I don't want her to watch TV and watch these reality shows and become what I don't like. I don't want her to look at that stuff and go, oh, I'm going to go join a ghost hunting team and we're going to go out and we're going to hunt ghosts and stuff. And it's like, well, you don't know what you're getting into. You know, if you want to do that stuff when you get older, when you're more aware of what you're getting into, that's fine. But for now, I want you to read up on as much of this stuff as you can, you know. Well, Dad, what if I've got questions about this? Well, then you need to go to www.paratopia.net.
That's the answer we were looking for the whole show.
God, it took an hour and a half to get to that?
Yeah, I babble a lot.
How much leading do you need?
I do babble a lot, and I apologize. I don't do a lot of interviews. It's like I said, you guys are the only people that managed to pull this crap out of me. I don't know why. I don't know where
it is. Good, and let's hope that when we eventually do an episode with Lobo, we can pull a little more crap out of him.
Well, Lobo's really, my take on Lobo is he comes at things from a much different perspective. He comes from a much different background, religion-wise and family-wise than me. He's had some very crazy experiences that for whatever reason, we just don't talk about our experiences with one another. I guess they're just not important to one another with us as each other. We both know we've had some screwed up experiences, and it doesn't matter to us as long as we're on the same level. But there's been interviews and stuff where Lobo will go off, and I'll just sit back and let him go off and let him talk, and I'll hear stuff coming out of him, and it's like, wow. Because he has very different, he might have very different perspectives on the world and stuff that I do. But Lobo's into some crazy stuff. He's into some really bizarre science, and he's got a lot of really unusual hobbies. He's really into sea monkeys. He's going to kill me for saying that.
As well really, should.
Did you say sea monkeys?
Well, he's into, like, when I first started talking to him, I'm like, so tell me about what you're into. And he starts rattling all these crazy hobbies. And he's like, well, I don't want to tell you about this one, but I'm into different breeds of blah, blah, blah shrimp. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, they're sea monkeys. But there's all these different breeds of sea monkeys.
Well,
and
wait a minute. To be fair, they're super sea monkeys.
Exactly. And they live in Atlantis, as this little jar shows you. But
just tell him they'll crawl in his ear while he sleeps and lay eggs.
And they now control him.
Him.
Like, if you'd have done this interview with both of us tonight, it might have been very different.
Well, man, thanks a lot. I mean, you know, for doing it. I mean, on a short notice, I might add.
No, it's cool. I can relate. You know, we record our shows at 1 o'clock in the morning, and you know, our interviews, we go through crazy stuff trying to get our interviews and stuff. So doing stuff for you guys is no big deal because you're in the business, so you know what it's like.
Yeah, and thanks for
asking intelligent questions.
well, thanks for answering them, and thanks for opening up and I think irregardless of the fact that you don't use your real name or not, I think it's still, shows a lot of guts to come out publicly and talk about very weird things that typically, and I think probably 20 years ago, we probably wouldn't have been talking about.
Well,
and so
didn't do
thank
it
you
for
for
the
that.
longest time. And there's another show that we support. It's 13 Skulls, and it's TJ. And for a very long time, I never talked about this stuff with anybody, and it became easier. That's the one thing cool about the whole paranormal television world that came along. It's made a lot of people more accepting of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So there is a good light at the end of the tunnel. But I sent in the whole dog story to TJ, and he read it on the air without using my name, and that was the very first time that story had ever been told outside of my family to anybody. And when I heard the episode, it was a big weight off of my shoulders. It was even though he didn't use my name, he read it on the air, and I was like, wow, I just felt better just getting it out there, because I couldn't tell, because even if it were a UFO story, I would have had an easier time telling the UFO story, but it doesn't fit. It just didn't fit into anything, and it was just and plus you can't tell people, hey, I might have been possessed when I was a kid, because I kind of look at you like, okay, yeah, exactly.
Werewolf and Roejen.
Yeah. So, and then
You're welcome, both of you.
Thanks, Jared.
And audience.
That's great. And that's
we
where
were
we'll
talking
leave
in
it,
an
I
episode
think,
about
too.
when do I want to cry. This is the time where I want to cry, Jeremy.
Can't we all just have a good cry?
We just have a good cry now that you've howled.
Well, Roejen, thank you for coming on the show. And
Yeah, I hope I haven't been a bore. I hope I haven't rattled on too much.
And people can catch you at www.projectarchivist.com with co-host Lobo, and you will be covering much broader subjects than we cover, because you get into deep history territory.
We haven't yet.
You plan on it.
Well, let me tell you one more thing. If
you want to.
I don't know if you guys have this problem. We're trying really hard to get away from the paranormal all the time. And the problem is we've tried to contact some really hard science people, and I'll tell them, yes, we do this show. We want to have you on the show. And they're like, well, tell me about your show. And I'll say, we cover this, we cover that. And then, of course, I mentioned we'll cover paranormal because I'm being honest, and B, they might download the show. As soon as I mention we start talking about ghosts and Bigfoots, the line goes dead, or I never hear from the people again. And it really bums us out. We want to talk to people about more cutting edge science and stuff, and we're having a really hard time getting people from those fields to be on the show. So lately we've been doing, the other thing is we didn't want to do a lot of interviews, but lately interviews have been falling into our lap. We've come to the point now where people are calling us saying, hey, we want to be on your show. Really? Why?
Yep. And that's the way you go too. And that's the way you go.
We're trying really hard to be more normal, less para, even if it's strange normal. And man, I'm telling you, I don't know if you guys have run into that or not, but it's been a bitch, I don't know.
Yeah, we ran into that. I mean, but we're good about bullshitting and making us sound intellectual. So that's the way to go.
Actually, only one. I mean, I think the only one that did that was
No. There was
Dr. Lilienfeld.
Dr. Lilienfeld and Dr. Dan Hooper.
Oh, really? Was he apprehensive?
Well, I didn't realize that he was a skeptic until I saw him on the History Channel in some special, playing the part of a skeptic.
Ah.
But I had read his book. That was just a book about physics. He's a professor somewhere, and
I see.
And yeah, I mean, I don't. Well, I should say this. I don't know if I have to, but what I do in approaching guests like that is run down the litany of other people we've had on that are physicists or that are sort of serious people that they might have heard of, and try to just present it like, look, we're all over the map here. We're not just doing face on Mars crap.
Yeah, we're trying to do that. Another reason is because like shows like yours, like you guys had Jason Offutt on and stuff. You've had a lot of people on. Like we were going to try to get Jason Offutt on. We didn't hear from him. We've kind of given up on it, but you guys had him on. So shows like yours push us to try to do even more or something, because we don't want to be covering the same stuff that you guys are as much as possible. So like when you guys had Jason Offutt on, it was like, well, we probably shouldn't have him on, or at least not for a little while. But because of that, we went off and found a couple of other really cool people that are talking about other stuff. And had you guys not had Jason on the air, we might have not have gone out. It might have not have pushed us out, to go out and try to do something different. We're not trying to be better, but we're trying to be different. And we want to do things that coexist with other shows like yours to give, because we all share a lot of the same fans. There's no secret there, but we don't want to, even though we imitate formats and styles, we don't want to imitate content as much as possible. So,
Yeah, well, that's a good rule of thumb.
That's why we're big fans of your guys. We hang out in your forums and stuff all the time, and we post up on your page. We stalk you. We know that you eat vegetarian pineapple pizza.
Every chance I get.
But, so thanks for being there. Thanks for doing what you do.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
All right. You too. Take care.
Bye.
This is Jason Offit, author of Darkness Walks, The Shadow People Among Us, and you're listening to Paratopia.
So the Jeff.
Ew. So the Jer.
Was that creepy?
Yeah, just a little.
So the Jeff. It rubs the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again.
No.
Yeah, that Roejen interview was pretty interesting, yes?
Yeah. I mean, he's had some, that whole dog thing as a kid, that's some weird stuff. That, again, like you said, doesn't really fit into any box, and is another one of those things that strikes me funny in the sense of, number one, how other people in his family don't seem to want to talk about it, but is easily the sort of thing that a skeptic could walk along and go, well, this thing was around all the time, where's the photographs of it? I mean, it's so easy to dismiss offhandedly, but I totally I believe that he experienced what he did with it, and that is, the question remains is, what the hell was it? Was it an animal? Was it just a mangy half-breed, wolf / German Shepherd, or was it something else?
Well, here's a sort of rhetorical question that I was formulating in my being during this episode. Is it possible to have these types of experiences and not have that moment where you think I'm being initiated into something, or you think I'm destined for something, or there's puppet masters, whatever that is, that step outside yourself moment and realize that there's some sort of destiny, fate, something that you're not making free will choices about. You think it's possible to be a participant in this stuff and not have that moment?
Yeah. You do? Yeah.
Did you never have that moment?
In the beginning, I didn't know what was going on. I mean, it's a large part of confusion when this stuff first comes up. I mean, I certainly from a young age knew that I had some very weird shit in my youth that I could not explain, and I didn't particularly focus on it. I mean, a lot of what Ro had to say tonight, I kind of identified with, in the sense that it was weird things, but I never really engaged it. I've never really poked at it or stirred it or even really, I thought about it a lot, but I didn't expose it to anyone. I didn't tell anyone about it. My parents, my girlfriend at the time, and I told them, but that was the extent of it. Not something you would talk about in the way of friends, but I don't know that I necessarily thought this is a part of something bigger or anything like that. I didn't know what it was.
So not a rhetorical question.
No. No. I mean, I think everybody goes through it differently. I think, some people might immediately see some bigger picture. But I think the vast amount of people either don't engage it at all and blow it off as, whatever that was.
But you have had some thoughts of, at some point in your life, like, gee, maybe I agreed to this. Maybe there was some...
Sure, that's later on, though. Yeah.
But, I mean, it happens. I mean, I'm just saying, is it possible to not have that moment at some point in
You mean
your
ever?
life?
Yeah, you mean ever.
Where it's like you have that, you step outside yourself moment. I mean, I'm just wondering if that moment goes hand in hand with this experience, then is the subjective part, how we interpret that moment, is that the important moment of the moment, if you will? Where some people go off the deep end and think they're special and think, whatever, all that goes with that, the narcissism and all of that. How you interpret that moment, which is just inherent to the situation of something poking at you from the abnormal, out of normalcy. Yeah. Which immediately puts you in sort of a multiple personality, a schizophrenic state. I don't know what you would call that, but something where either you just simply feel as though there's an outside presence informing your actions, or maybe you even hear a voice that you don't even associate as your own voice telling you, you're destined for blank. Greatness, something. Just you have destiny. Greatness. Because it's interesting here, he's not saying I was destined for greatness, or anything like that. It was just like I realized that there was this destiny aspect to all of this, and I don't quite know what to make of that.
Yeah.
I just wonder if it's possible not to have that feeling at some point.
Yeah, it's a good question.
I mean,
do
you know anyone? Do you know anyone who hasn't had that thought or that feeling with this?
You know, I don't, and you might even go as far as to say that even the people that, you know, you would meet in these different interests or these different groups, that even the people that you and I would look at and go, well, they are really out there, or these are extremely fringy people, even they will say it's something larger than ourselves, it's something bigger, this gave me this epiphany or whatever. I mean, by its nature, I think it's paradigm wrecking. And so there's that part of it. And I think that's more along the lines of what leads somebody to think there's more to this than just this and me. And is there a destiny that I have with this? I don't know. I understand where Roe is coming from with it, in the sense that you don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be that guy that says, well, I'm special, well, I've been chosen. You know, like, there's an aversion to that. And I think that's a healthy aversion to have. I don't know. I mean, I've not met anybody that I can put my finger on right at the top of my head that just sees this as what it is. But I guess you could say some of the people who don't look past the surface, I guess, maybe they don't ever have that kind of a moment. That's a guess. I don't know. I'm not them and I'm not in their head, but there are certain people who you listen to what they tell you about what they've experienced, and you believe that they've had this experience. They seem completely genuine about it, but it's all very surface level. And we've talked before about how there's many different levels to this experience, and they seem to be fixated on this one surface gleam that kind of speaks to them. And maybe even that, you get some kind of false epiphany about yourself or your destiny with this, or what it means to be involved and talking about these things. So I don't know.
Well, I'm going to throw out something. It's just, maybe it's an insight based on what I told you and what I had written to Dan Mitchell earlier, because we're trying to get him to come on, because on our forum there's this thread called Luminosity about his blog that's hugely popular, and it looks like he might actually come on the show, even though he's sort of thrown all this stuff away, or at least publicly he's decided he doesn't really want to be doing shows or writing his blog anymore or anything.
Right.
But something he had written on our forum was about his feeling as though he was initiated into something.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I had said to him and what I said to you is that it's interesting, because when I think about the fact that I wrote in my book, my first book, about this feels like an initiation. And when I think about that word initiation, it's clear to me in my head how I feel about it. I derive this meaning based on a feeling that is probably not rational to articulate, because I don't actually have an answer. Because the question is, initiated into what? And the answer is, I don't know, but I feel like I know. It's that age-old problem that we always have with this stuff. I feel like I know, even though I can't consciously say it. And I feel like maybe the reason for that is that what you're being initiated into is broader questions, deeper questions. You're being initiated out of your old questions into the new. And we're, of course, a society of answers. And so how do you articulate that except as I just did? So it's not like you're being initiated like a fraternity, or, like Skull and Bones or something, where you go through some scary shit and at the end you get to join a fraternity of people and they give you the big reveal, like, oh, here you are, here are the answers, here's the society you belong to, or whatever that is. No, this is being initiated into, okay, now you've got this new set of complex questions that your brain is prepared to handle and ponder. And so there is no answer. There literally is no rational answer to what you're being initiated into, except deeper questions. Mystery school and all, right? That's what this is. So the thing you're being initiated into is more mystery. But I wonder if that's being, I don't know, wrongly interpreted, misinterpreted by a lot of us when we see that because we're a society of answers, essentially, that we want there to be an answer. So we come up with one. So we go, okay, I'm special. I'm fulfilling my destiny. I'm being initiated into this order of higher beings who are doing X, Y, and Z, from their density to our density through vibratory frequencies, all of that stuff. It's like we concoct all of this stuff to give us the answer to what we're being initiated into, but the real answer is that that's a failure. That's that's completely your brain trying to interpret the scenario according to society and not according to what it actually is, which is still a mystery. Well,
if it's like you say, and we're being initiated into more unknown, I can definitely see that. I mean, we live in a pretty amazing time when you really think about it. I mean, at least technologically, technology is remaking itself yearly, and what is, I question, what is next year going to bring technologically? What's going to be the next thing? And I don't know that it's going to be an iPod in your ear, but I think within a year, what technology we've already come up with is going to go tenfold and tenfold again and tenfold again. This is just the way it works, and this is the way we've seen it since the advent of this stuff. And so we live in this age where we think we've got a pretty good bead on what's what. And I find it nothing short of amazing. And this is part of the reason that despite all of the bullshit this field contains, and despite all of the conflict whoring and all of that senseless arguing and personalities and egos and all of that, the one reason, to stay in this, if anybody's kind of on the fence, is that with everything that we know, and as good a beat as we think we have on what's what, we've got something poking its head in and going, nah. I find that nothing short of amazing. And I think, again, I go back to the man, Terence McKenna, who said in one of his lectures that I listened to not long ago, where he said that the UFO to him represents the opposite of science. It is essentially giving the finger to science just by being itself, and therefore is pushing us to recognize the greater picture. The problem is we don't know what that greater picture is. Like you said, the mystery is what it is. But, I mean, clearly, even in this field, I don't think we would have been able to have the guests nor the conversations, some of which that we've had on the show. Let's not kid ourselves. Some of Paratopia has been somewhat run-of-the-mill, I would say. Not many, but some have not been particularly groundbreaking. But I don't think you would have been able to have a program like this if indeed the technology was available 12 years ago, let's say. I think we'd have been shoved into a corner of, I don't even know how it would have been accepted. But clearly the subject is evolving, and just people like Roejen tonight talking about something that doesn't fit into any categorical box of the paranormal. And so we're recognizing something about this that doesn't seem to be able to fit. Like everybody says, think outside the box. That's in our opening theme, right? Well, the realization is that there is no box for the paranormal. And so I think our thinking about it is evolving. The problem is I'm not exactly sure that that's its intention, although it may be. What do I know? Maybe its intention and its initiation is just for you to say, or for it to say to us, you just don't know. And that goes back to our, conscious evolution idea, which came from Streeper. But that's what it all leads back to for me. Like something is leading us by the nose into the future, into what is going to be.
Well, but you can only have a future. See, here's the thing, right? And here's the thumbing your nose in science. I mean, on the one hand, we think that you get from here to there with logic, with answers, with rules that work and are repeatable.
Right.
But the real breakthroughs happen when you throw your arms up in the air and go, I don't know. That's when insight comes. I mean, things that are learned are knowledge from the past, right? Things, like we just said, things that have worked, knowledge from the past.
Right.
That's all learned experience. And that keeps the mechanism going, but the thing that was the impulse for the mechanism to come into existence in the first place was the insight, the eureka moment, the aha, which only comes in the moment of quiet when thought ceases. And then there's insight, there's epiphany. So I think that is the mystery. That is the sort of pulsing mystery in this is the I don't know. It's the reminder, it's the wake-up call, you don't know. I mean, it may not be anything more than that. It may not ever be about revealing its true face to us or anything. I mean, that might be the true face of this. You're simply
it might be.
telling a brick wall, you're not a brick wall. And in fact, here's a construction boulder to smash through you, you know?
Right. It's the same old thing. I mean, when you're faced with things that aren't human, and they're standing there on the floor and they're staring at you, and you go, you know, it's the old Seinfeld line. This is no good. This is no good. You know, because it is against everything that science and religion and all of these things tell you should be. And so the same with a flying saucer. I mean, a flying saucer stands still in the air, and it's not a balloon, and it's not an airplane, and it's like, you know, it's thumbing its nose at everything you think you know. And I think that's why this has evolved, is because everything, if there's been an evolution in the UFO, at least let's, you know, take that slice of the paranormal pie. If there's been an evolution in the UFO and the way it presents itself, the way we surmise it may have done at certain points. I mean, that says everything to me. It's like, this is not possible, but here it is. And you stand there staring at it going, this is not possible. But yet there it is. I've got to think on some level that's inspired people, that has interested people. It's got people engaged. It's got people thinking. I mean, we certainly do a fair amount of thinking around here, as do our listeners. And maybe that is the only thing that it's doing. I mean, one of the big writers out there said, you know, UFOs are here to make you think. And
how about this? Let's put it this way. What if, okay, you've got this potpourri of paranormal stuff happening to individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So you take a guy like Roejen and you give him a giant dog and some sort of odd possession.
Right.
You take Jeremy and you give him UFOs and little gray aliens, and you take Jeff and you give him a dude in a hood, whatever, you know.
Right.
You take all of these things that are, some are traumatic to people and some maybe aren't.
Mm-hmm.
And it provokes a personal evolution in that person. I mean, they've clearly now the consequence for them is normalcy ain't real. It isn't the whole thing. And so they've got to go through their own personal thing, but then they also are going to perhaps create specialties. So now you've got specialty groups. You've got ghosts, you've got exorcisms, you've got UFOs, you've got all these specialty things that you think are specialty, because now you've taken it to the tribe, right? You have this personal experience and you take your message to the tribe and you talk about it, and people try to discover, okay, what is the nature of ghosts? What is the nature of UFOs? What is the nature of this?
Right.
And then that isn't working, because the nature of all these things is the singular source. So eventually those things break down. Eventually they start to cross-pollinate and look at each other and go, wait a minute, how is it possible that ghost phenomena sounds sneakily a lot like, alien abduction phenomena, which sounds suspiciously like fairy folklore, which sounds an awful lot like, and so on and so forth. And then eventually the tribes break it all down, break down their breakdowns. Mm-hmm. They throw it all away and they go, oh, okay, now we're back to the question. So it's like you've got the individual who has the question, who is given the question, and the individual shares it with people, and those people erect their belief systems and sciences and whatever researches around these specific areas as if they're specific things. But then the big epiphany for the tribe is that, no, those aren't singular phenomena. They're all part of a tapestry emanating from this one thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you think that is the nature of this evolution? Do you think that is what's happening? You plant a seed, you plant a seed, you plant a seed. You're going to go through X amount of decades of sort of personalized or singularized studies that then merge into one larger umbrella study that then probably eventually end up in even throwing your hands up in the air about that. And then the big reveal, which is probably yet another set of questions, only this time for the society, this time not just for, the person, because everyone's in on it at this point.
Right. It becomes something everybody knows. I mean, that's what we've said, the big top-down revelation for, disclosure. That's what it boils down to. It becomes something that everybody's familiar with. And I think, answer to your question, yeah, I think that's a possibility. I think this whole thought process could evolve into something else. I have no idea what. I guess it's going to depend on what's presented next. I don't honestly know. Part of me says, what I mentioned to Roejen about the infighting and all of that. I mean, as you were talking, when you talk about bringing something back to the tribe and then everybody mulls it over and then they come to this, after gathering all of these different sprinkles of really bizarre things that people deem paranormal, they come to a realization that this is all the same thing, or it's all originating from one place or one thing that is making these things happen. That's not totally different from the global tribe that we're bringing this show to, or anyone out there on the net who types into the internet message boards or whatever. We're kind of doing that already. And it's met with this other part of this, which I find really interesting. And the more I'm thinking about it, the more sense it seems to make to me. I don't know how listeners are going to feel about this, but I have to wonder if not only in the sense of this can't be, so we're going to try and figure it out because, like you said, we're a culture of answers. We desire the answer to a mystery. What better a way to lead someone than to give them a mystery? Because, we're like the vampire or the witch with the knotted rope. We've got to untie those knots. But in the process of that, you also have debate, and I mean hot debate, and you've got argumentation. And at the same time, you've got people who are just completely irrational and completely require you to develop skin and develop patience and develop sharp knives verbally, communicatively, in order to wade through it at all. And so the more that I think about reaching some kind of, like, if we're going to coagulate all these paranormal sprinkles together, then I think we need to take the whole thing. We need to take every part of it, which includes the notion that I think this field produces more infighting and argumentation than most interests do. I'm sure every interest has its hot debates and every interest has its flame wars and all of that. But in this field, it's really bad. It's really rife. And I have to wonder on some level if we're not being sharpened in that way as well, as the deeper thinking, the bigger questions, the taking the blinders off and seeing the bigger picture. But we're also being sharpened in the way of our communication process, because it's all about communication. And I have to wonder if that's not also a part that's sharpening our relationships with each other and how we deal with people who either A, can't be reached, or B, have a completely opposite view from your own that doesn't make any sense to you. And how do all of those things, how do you as a culture deal with these kinds of people in a community where you have to communicate, where you can't escape it? And I think that's part of it. The longer that I see some of the arguments, and you're in these arguments, and at the time they make great sense, like battling this battle or that battle, or having this debate or argument. But when you step back from it and you look at it and you kind of separate yourself from that discussion, you go, Jesus, really? Like, is this what it's come to? And you become aggravated with it. But is that building up some kind of tolerance and behavior? And is that sharpening, communicating skills to be able to articulate better the deeper questions? I mean, is that what this is? Is that doing something? I don't know.
Perhaps we're not dealing with puppet masters or destiny. What we're dealing with is an intelligence that may or may not be separate from us, that is transforming us based on our predictability, sort of using our predictability to to map out, okay, we're going to implant seed here, 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 and here. It's going to grow this way. That flower is going to fall off, and then it's going to grow that way. And then we'll all meet up in the end. It's a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at it as the aspect that something knows that we have to bend down in the deep area of the stream to get our face in the water to get a drink, and so it comes behind us and kicks us in, and we don't know how to swim. See you downstream. I mean, I do. I look at it in that sense. Like, it's...
But do you think
like,
that you look at it in that sense because that's who you are?
Probably. Yeah, probably. But, I mean, when you look at this whole thing, doesn't it seem rather like the harsh teacher in a way?
Well, yeah.
It seems like the harsh teacher.
Because, again, the old Zen thing of smacking the student with a giant stick on the back of the head to give him instant enlightenment. I mean,
right.
I mean, this goes back to the type of debates that I constantly seem to be in, every couple of months or so on our own forum about, hey, Jer, why can't you be nicer? It's like, well, because nice isn't the point. We're not here to coddle you folks. We're here to fucking wake you up. I mean, that seems to be the message of this thing to me. There's no waking insecurity. So, yeah, I mean, you dive in and you swim. You don't sit there and map out the mathematics of how one flaps one's arms in the water to stay afloat. You actually swim.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems like it's the harsh teacher. It's the one that throws you in at the deep end of the pool and says, you're going to learn to swim or you're not. You're either going to go over to the side and get out like a wuss, or you're going to put one hand over the other and start kicking. And I think at least, I mean, and I'm glad for this. I'm glad that, I mean, as Roejen mentioned, we got amazing listeners and thoughtful listeners and people who really like to think and don't like to be just told. And I love that. And I mean, we're unbelievably lucky in that sense. But like in our corner of the sandbox, you don't come in here feeling like you've got a handle on it. I mean, that's just the thing. It's like this is in the way of, this is thinking. This is not about belief. This is not about all of the things that make the paranormal field so questionable to me, and why I never really quite found that perfect home where you met like-minded people. Everybody had some kind of belief core that you didn't go near or you got your knuckles slapped, although that may be, again, part of how does this make you grow? How does this make you think? And how does it force you to interact with people not of your particular point of view? And then how do you grow from that? I mean, I know, at least for me, and I know we've had this conversation before, that back in our younger days in this, I mean, we could go in a flame war for what, a week, 2 weeks, or longer. And these days that just doesn't seem as important. Like if it's a day, that's long,
It's been a day today.
Yeah, it sure as hell has.
But we keep them private now.
Yeah, we don't want to expose you listeners to that crap. But yeah, it's I do wonder if that isn't part of it, because it does seem to be incredibly prevalent. And these days, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say I think that that's part of this phenomena. I think the infighting that everyone has complained about is all part of it. Even past what maybe George Hansen would say, that this is the nature of anti-structure. It breeds conflict. I think it might even be further than that. I think I would go as far to say is that this is the way we're being led around by the nose. Like, now you're going to look at this, now you're going to deal with it. And now you're going to talk about it with other people who don't share your point of view. And it's not a matter of convincing them. It's a matter of you all finding some kind of similarity or learning how to interact with each other in a way that's productive. And you're going to meet people that are inherently unproductive. And how will you deal with them? Dr. Kochjon wrote in our first magazine that we all determine the value of the research that's done in any paranormal field just by buying the book or going to the lecture or listening to the podcast or whatever. You determine the value of it. And so is part of all of the infighting and all of the arguing to make it so that we more critically evaluate what it's presenting to us. And then how do we interpret that to each other and communicate with each other? Communication is like the biggest problem with all of this. I mean, it has been since, in my opinion, since the very beginning of it. It's how do you communicate what can't possibly be, and have it be, again, it doesn't let us off the hook with, well, Bob and Joe and Ann was like, that's a rare thing, to have multiple people all saying the same thing. But even then, in that case, you're still a small populace of people, a small little conglomeration that then has to go to the bigger tribe, as you say, and relate this experience. That's not easy because it's a personal experience for everyone. And that makes it very close to the heart, which is a place many people don't want to stick a spear and don't want to have that poked. And so maybe part of the reason that it becomes so personal is because it's forcing us to open up personally to people. It's forcing you to bear feelings and insecurities and thoughts to everyone, because that is what it's doing. I mean, that is a part of what it invokes in you to do. And by the way, I'll say this, I find it very interesting that Roejen is close to 40 or 40 years old, and now he is doing this podcast, which falls in line with something that you and I talked about eons ago, which was, approaching that age is like a very, I don't know, kind of a, it's the point where you say, I've got to get this out, or I've got to do something. Like that became a big deal for a lot of people for a while, where 40 years old seemed to be this kicking off point for a lot of people. Like maybe we were early bloomers. I don't know what the fuck that means, but there's that. I mean, all of these things seem to tie together to me in a really, really, I mean, I find it slightly uncomfortable. I find it slightly uncomfortable that, where is it leading and what is it doing by doing that? I can't help but think that it's positive in that anything that makes you think or question or that's got to be good. That's got to be a positive move.
Well, again, I mean, my position here is, the transformation is the death of our species as we know it. And so you only think you have a choice in that as the caterpillar thinks it has a choice in going into a cocoon and becoming a butterfly. Right. But you don't. You just do it. You just jump in and do it.
It just happens, yeah.
And this is part of that jumping in. And if it's scary, that there's sort of like, well, that sucks, but tough shit. You're going to go, and when you're on the other side, you'll be fine. You'll be freer. But I have a bunch of other thoughts, but I'm going to save them for Paratopia Live this Sunday at 10 p.m. That way we have 2 hours worth of stuff to talk about.
Well, 90 minutes this week. It's 90 minutes.
Oh, is it? Okay.
We're scheduled for 90 minutes, but we can probably go over if we get into a good spot.
Let's try not to. By 11:30, we'll be punchy,
That'll be fun.
All right. Very good. Well, our thanks again to Roejen. Catch him at projectarchivist.com. And Jeff Ritzman, as always, a pleasure speaking with you.
And with you, sir.
And Paratopia, have a good night.
Good night, all.